Chapter 1878. Gu Lingyao's face immediately turned red when she heard Hundred Flower Fairy's words. She then pouted. "Humph, I'm not going." Gu Lingyao was just like a child most of the time. She did not know how to keep her mouth shut and was all bark and no bite. Hundred Flower Fairy smiled and shook her head. After a night of silence, Hong Xiu finally got what she wanted. The next morning, Xiao Chen personally brought Hong Xiu to visit Xiao Qing and Bai Ruyue. Facing a daughter-in-law like Hong Xiu, Bai Ruyue naturally didn't like her very much. She immediately pulled Hong Xiu's hand and chatted with her. Facing Bai Ruyue's enthusiasm, Hong Xiu quickly relaxed. Her usual carefree personality was quickly revealed. However, Bai Ruyue did not mind at all. The Xiao family did not have any rules to begin with. Moreover, Xiao Qing and Bai Ruyue were extremely easygoing and kind elders. It was not difficult to see this from how the two elders treated Qing Yao and Qing Luo like their own daughters. The Xiao family had another daughter-in-law, so everyone naturally gathered together for lunch. Although everyone had long reached the Anidia realm, and even Xiao Qing and Bai Ruyue no longer needed to eat to replenish their energy, according to Bai Ruyue, eating together as a family was to strengthen their relationship. Therefore, in the Xiao family, eating and drinking together had already become a habit. Even though there was no substantial meaning to it, everyone in the Xiao family was still happy and never tired of it. Hong Xiu successfully entered the Xiao family. Qing Yao, Qing Luo, Fei Mei, and Anlan naturally changed the way they addressed Hong Xiu when they saw her. They all called her Madam. Madam. Qing Yao and Qing Luo bowed respectfully when they saw Hong Xiu. However, Hong Xiu was not used to this at first. She blushed and did not know how to respond. In fact, Hong Xiu was secretly surprised by the 6 maidservants of the Xiao family. It could not be helped. Qing Yao and Qing Luo were extremely beautiful. Although they were not as beautiful as Hong Xiu and the other madams, they were definitely first-class beauties. Moreover, they seemed to be quite talented. How could such people be willing to be mere maidservants? Hong Xiu did not know that Qing Yao and Qing Luo had been by Xiao Chen's side for a long time and were already used to the Xiao family's lifestyle. Although they were maidservants, the 6 women already regarded themselves as part of the Xiao family. The family sat down. Gu Lingyao was the first to speak to Hong Xiu with a serious face. "Sister Hong Xiu, thank you for taking care of your husband all these years." It was rare for Gu Lingyao to be so serious. However, everyone was not used to seeing her like this. Xiao Chen even laughed loudly. Gu Lingyao's personality was eccentric and was very similar to Hong Xiu's. The two women naturally became familiar with each other. As for Tianyu, she also greeted Hong Xiu in a friendly manner. The meal quickly ended amidst everyone's laughter. Hong Xiu's matter was perfectly resolved. In a few days, Hong Xiu quickly integrated into the Xiao family. Luan Luan, especially, finally changed the way she addressed Hong Xiu and addressed her as fifth mother. The Xiao family was joyous and harmonious. After resting for 3 days, Xiao Chen continued his inhumane cultivation. Although his wish of so many years had finally come true and the family was finally reunited, Xiao Chen did not dare to relax at all. This was because Xiao Chen knew that if he did not have the strength, he might have to go through what happened in the past again. This was what it meant to be in the underworld. In the world of cultivators, it did not mean that others would not provoke you just because you did not want to. Therefore, in order to prevent the tragedy of the past from happening again, Xiao Chen needed the strength to protect the people around him. He would never let the people around him leave him again. The huge rock in his heart was finally lifted. As a result, Xiao Chen cultivated even harder. Jun Wuya saw this and was very gratified. Xiao Chen did not relax at all because of the arrival of the happy occasion. On the contrary, he worked even harder. This made Jun Wuya's little worry disappear completely. Of course, Jun Wuya was not idle either. This time, Xiao Chen did not even need to say anything. Junwuya had already prepared the power of all living beings for Qin Shuru, Shao Qing, Bai Rui, Qing Yao, and Qing Luo to help them condense the heavenly immortal mansion. The power of all living beings was extremely precious in Hachibra Senkai, but it was not so in the Great Thousand World. Therefore, Junwuya took out the power of 12 heavenly immortal mansions in one go. This was nothing. Compared to the price he had to pay to revive everyone, the power of 12 heavenly immortal mansions was simply child's play. It was not worth mentioning. Shao Chun was naturally very grateful for Junwuya's actions. Shao Chun did not need his family to have a strong combat power, but Shao Chun hoped that they could live longer and stay by his side. Therefore, the level of cultivation was very important. This was because the higher the cultivation, the stronger the combat power. Shao Qing and Bai Rui's battle prowess could no longer be reversed. After all, the cultivation of the two elders had been piled up by Shao Chen's heavenly treasures along the way. To put it bluntly, the two elders only had cultivation but no battle prowess to match their cultivation. However, this didn't matter. The two elders didn't care about this. On the other hand, Qin Shuru and the other two girls, as well as Qing Yao and Qing Luo, were quite talented and had decent combat power. Therefore, Junwuya put in some effort when he condensed the heavenly immortal mansion for them. He wanted to increase their combat power. Everyone in the family was busy condensing the heavenly immortal mansion. As a result, Shao Chun was even more focused on cultivation. In the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed. Originally, they had agreed on a 10-year period, but when the time came, Junwuya had no intention of leaving at all. Therefore, Shao Chun naturally would not be foolish enough to take the initiative to mention this matter. After all, there were indeed many benefits for Shao Chun to be able to cultivate by Junwuya's side. It was much better than cultivating by himself. Shao Chun could not wait for Junwuya to stay by his side. Therefore, how could he take the initiative to mention this matter? Since Shao Chun did not mention it, Junwuya did not intend to leave either. As a result, Shao Chun's cultivation continued. Furthermore, the difficulty was getting higher and higher. The daily cultivation tasks also became more and more arduous. However, Shao Chun did not complain at all. Shao Chun's cultivation continued to make breakthroughs, and his combat prowess continued to increase. Many treasures of heaven and earth, as well as pills, that Shao Chun had never seen before, were taken out by Junwuya for Shao Chun to refine. With the help of these precious treasures, Shao Chun's progress was naturally rapid. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1879. Junwuya had put in a lot of effort into nurturing Shao Chun. He had never nurtured someone so wholeheartedly before. Shao Chun was the first. As for why Junwuya did not choose to leave after 10 years, the reason was very simple. It was entirely because of Junwuya's change in mentality. In the beginning, Junwuya had accepted Shao Chun as his disciple not because of how outstanding Shao Chun was. After all, in the great wide world, there were many young geniuses who were as talented as Shao Chun or even stronger than Shao Chun. Junwuya had seen them before. Shao Chun could only be considered passable among these people, but he was not the best. The only thing that could make Junwuya look at him in a different light was probably Shao Chun's sword body. However, that was still not enough for Junwuya to accept Shao Chun as his disciple. The real reason that made Junwuya accept Shao Chun as his disciple was because of the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's request. As such, Junwuya did not really want to accept Shao Chun, so he naturally did not want to waste too much time on Shao Chun. 10 years was already the limit that Junwuya had reached after careful consideration. He did not want to disappoint the heaven-breaking sword sovereign before he died. However, as he interacted with Shao Chun, Junwuya's mentality gradually changed. At first, he was unwilling, but later on, he did his best. At that moment, Jun Wuya had truly acknowledged Shao Chen as his disciple. Although Shao Chen's talent was not the strongest among the younger generation that Jun Wuya had seen, it was definitely enough for him to be ranked in the top 5. Such talent was actually enough. What made Jun Wuya even more commendable was Shao Chen's perseverance. Because Shao Chen had perseverance that ordinary people could not match, Jun Wuya believed that Shao Chen would definitely achieve great things in the future. Furthermore, Shao Chen's personality and the concern of the Shao family made Jun Wuya gradually like the feeling of living with Shao Chen. Of course, a drinking buddy like the wine Taoist was also indispensable. Because of the change in mentality, Jun Wuya chose to stay. At least, he would teach Shao Chen everything that he could before leaving. Time passed day by day and year by year. Qin Shi's 4 women, Shao Qing, Bai Ryue, Qin Yao, and Qing Luo, had all stepped into the immortal state and successfully condensed the heavenly immortal mansion. All of this was thanks to Jun Wuya's help. In the blink of an eye, Shao Chen had been cultivating for 19 years. In these 19 years, Shao Chen had been cultivating every day. Because this mainland was hidden by Jun Wuya, no one in the 8 Wastelands world could find it. It was like a paradise. It could be said that he did not pay attention to the outside world and only focused on reading books and cultivating. However, Shao Chen did not know that after 19 years, another war had broken out in the 8 Wastelands world. At the same time, the situation in the entire 8 Wastelands world had changed drastically. The entire 8 Wastelands world was in a complete mess now. The root of all this had to be explained 3 years ago. Originally, after Shao Chen and Jun Wuya went into seclusion, the 8 Wastelands world was still considered peaceful. Although the Hachibra Senkai and the 8 Wastelands world were in a stalemate, there were no large-scale battles between the two sides. Although the friction was not short, it did not affect the overall situation. However, 3 years ago, a group of mysterious people suddenly appeared in the 8 Wastelands world without any warning. No one knew where they came from, but just a dozen of them directly swept through the 8 Wastelands world. In total, there were only a dozen of them, but their strength was above the will of the Heavenly Way, Luoli and the other sector lords. Luoli and the others did not know where these people came from. Although they were surprised by their strength, they did not have the slightest intention of bowing down. After all, the first thing these people did when they arrived was to plunder the resources of the 8 Wastelands world. To Luoli and the others, this was an act of banditry. The Hachibra Senkai was not willing to bow down. On the contrary, the will of the Heavenly Way seemed to know something that Luoli and the others did not. Therefore, the will of the Heavenly Way quickly led the 8 Wastelands world to rely on these mysterious experts. They became the lackeys of these mysterious experts. With the support of these mysterious experts, the situation of the entire 8 Wastelands world changed completely. The Hachibra Senkai quickly fell into a disadvantageous position. In less than a year, the first sector lord of the Hachibra Senkai, Mu Tai, was killed by these mysterious experts when he went out. Red Lotus was also severely injured. Although she managed to survive, her injuries were extremely serious. The sudden appearance of these mysterious experts completely broke the balance of the 8 Wastelands world. With the existence of these mysterious experts, the Hachibra Senkai was obviously no match for the 8 Wastelands world. However, what was surprising was that these mysterious experts did not seem to have any intention of destroying the Hachibra Senkai. They seemed to be searching for something. All along, these mysterious experts did not seem to care about the Hachibra Senkai. Originally, if these mysterious experts really wanted to destroy the Hachibra Senkai would not have been able to hold on for so long. No one knew the purpose of these mysterious experts. At this time, in the 7th Wastelands, in what was once the Central World, the magnificent palace that belonged to the will of the Heavenly Way was now occupied by these mysterious experts. On this day, 2 middle-aged men in long black robes were sitting in the palace. These two men were the leaders of these mysterious experts. Both of them had a look of doubt in their eyes, and one of them spoke. That's impossible. This world should not have been set foot by the people of the great thousand world. Why can't we find the world spirit? That is indeed a bit strange. However, world spirits are not easy to find to begin with. Have those aboriginals put in more effort and search carefully. I do not believe that we will not be able to find world spirits in this world. Hearing that, another middle-aged man coldly said. These mysterious experts were extremely contemptuous of the warriors of the Eight Wastelands world, and they directly called them aboriginals. Hearing this, the middle-aged man who spoke first nodded slightly to express his agreement. Just as the two of them were talking, a mysterious expert who followed the two of them strode in from outside the palace. His eyes were full of disdain as he spoke. Elder, the will of the heavenly way is requesting an audience. I guess they want us to help them deal with the Hachibra Senkai. Do you want me to chase them away? Speaking of the will of the heavenly way from the Eight Wastelands world, this mysterious expert's face was full of mockery and contempt. The will of the heavenly way, who was revered by all living beings in the Eight Wastelands world, was like a dog wagging its tail and begging for mercy in the mouth of these mysterious experts. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 1880. The will of the heavenly way seeks an audience. Upon hearing this, one of the two middle-aged men sitting at the head of the table said with a look of disdain, "Tell them to scram. They can't even find the world's spirit, and they still have the cheek to come?" During this period of time, many powerhouses from the Eight Desolates side had been ordered by these mysterious powerhouses to look for the so-called world's spirit. However, there had been no news, and the matter had not been settled properly. Naturally, this middle-aged man was not interested in talking nonsense with these will of the heavenly way. However, upon hearing this, the other middle-aged man said, "Wait, let them in. Junior brother, if you want the horse to run, you have to feed it first. Destroying a Hachibra Senkai is a piece of cake for us. Let's give them a taste of the sweetness first." Although the Eight Desolates world and the Great Thousand world could not be compared at all, finding the so-called world spirit in the Eight Desolates world was definitely not something that the dozen of them could do. Therefore, they had to make use of the will of the heavenly way and use their strength to search for the world's spirit. In this way, they could not disappoint these will of the heavenly way too much for the time being. Hearing this middle-aged man's words, although a hint of unwillingness flashed in the eyes of the person who spoke earlier, he still nodded and said, "Senior brother is right. Since that's the case, let them come in." With the agreement of the two men, the will of the heavenly way soon entered the main hall. Facing the two men, the will of the heavenly way bowed respectfully and said, "Greetings, elder." Upon hearing this, the two middle-aged men at the head of the table said, "All right, tell us. Why have you all come together?" Upon hearing this, the seventh will of the heavenly way replied, "Elder, recently, the Hachibra Senkai has reached the limit of its ability to retaliate. We beg you to take action and completely destroy the Hachibra Senkai. This way we can do our best for you." "Are you threatening me?" The Seventh Wasteland's will of the heavenly way said it was the Eight Wastelands immortal world's counterattack. Hearing this, an elder's eyes flashed coldly. In the elder's eyes, the seventh desolate will of the heavenly way and the others were simply not qualified to bargain. They were simply courting death. Hearing this, the other will of the heavenly way was also stunned. Then, they all knelt in front of the two elders. Who would have thought that the will of the heavenly way, who was high and mighty in front of all living beings, would actually crawl in front of these two elders like dogs? Looking at the nervous faces of the members of the will of the heavenly way who were kneeling on the ground, the elder, who had been silent all this while, said faintly, "The Hachibra Senkai's counterattack." Don't use such a childish excuse in the future. Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? Elder, please forgive us. Hearing this, the seventh will of the heavenly way said, "All right, since all of you have come together, then so be it. You all can think of a way to deal with the Hachibara Senkai. I don't have the intention to do it personally. Come at the last moment. At that time, I will only order people to take action and destroy the Hachibara Senkai in one fell swoop so that all of you can unify this world." Hearing this, the elder said faintly, he would only take action at the last moment. As for the other matters, it would still be up to the will of the heavenly way to solve them. The elder's intention was very clear. However, hearing this, the members of the will of the heavenly way were ecstatic. The reason was very simple. As long as these mysterious experts took action and killed the Hachibara Senkai's Luoli and the other sector lords, the rest of the matter would be simple. They had succeeded in achieving their goal. In response, the members of the will of the heavenly way quickly nodded in response. "Thank you, Elder, for your kindness. We will be willing to sacrifice our lives for you. All right, you may leave." In response to the respect of the members of the will of the heavenly way, the elder waved his hand indifferently and shooed them away as if they were flies. Seeing the members of the will of the heavenly way leave, a look of disdain flashed across the elder's eyes. "What a bunch of dogs, heh? All right, let's continue with the search. If it really comes down to it, let's get someone to destroy the Hachibara Senkai. It's not that difficult anyway. Furthermore, destroying the Hachibara Senkai will make it easier for us to search for the world spirit. You must know that this is a task given by the High Sect. If we fail, not only you and me, even the sect leader will not be able to escape punishment," another elder said with a serious expression. At the same time, upon hearing the two words High Sect, the expression of the elder, who originally had a look of disdain, changed as he nodded his head solemnly. They prayed for these mysterious experts to take action against the 8 Desolation immortal world. Although the reply they received was that they would only take action at the last moment, this was already enough to make the wills of the heavenly Tao ecstatic. As long as these mysterious experts were willing to take action, the Hachibara Senkai would definitely be destroyed. After leaving the main hall, the members of the will of the heavenly way quickly went to make preparations to launch an all-out attack on the Hachibara Senkai. The Hachibara Senkai seemed to be on the verge of destruction. In the face of these mysterious experts, the Hachibara Senkai did not have much power to fight back. However, Xiao Qin was completely unaware of this. Several months passed. He had been training with Jun Wuya for a total of 20 years. In these 20 years, Xiao Qin's gains had exceeded all his previous gains. It could be said that in these 20 years, Jun Wuya had completely opened a new door to martial arts for Xiao Qin, allowing Xiao Qin to understand what martial arts were and what cultivation was. Meeting Jun Wuya was indeed the greatest opportunity in Xiao Qin's life. However, all good things must come to an end. After 20 years, Jun Wuya was finally ready to leave. It was not because of Xiao Qin, but because Jun Wuya had nothing left to teach Xiao Qin. He had already taught Xiao Qin everything that he could. The rest was up to Xiao Qin himself. Moreover, there was no point for Jun Wuya to continue staying. Xiao Qin would not be able to make much progress in a short period of time. People like Jun Wuya naturally liked freedom and liked to wander around. Obviously, it was impossible for people like Jun Wuya to be tied to one place. Perhaps in the future, Jun Wuya would choose a place with beautiful scenery to live in seclusion. However, for now, Jun Wuya still wanted to explore around and see how vast the world was. He wanted to see if he could travel all the way to the 4 corners of the world that no one had ever traveled before in his lifetime. In the main hall of the courtyard, Jun Wuya sat on the main seat. Xiao Qin stood below him. Xiao Qing, Bai Ruyue Xianyuan Ling, Long Qing, the wine Taoist, and the girls were all present. Looking at Jun Wuya, Xiao Qin said reluctantly, "Master, are you really leaving? You little brat, it's useless for me to stay. I've already taught you everything that I should. What you do next is up to you. Don't tell me you still want me to stay by your side for the rest of your life?" Greedy little brat. Hearing this, Jun Wuya scolded with a smile. Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 1881. Jun Wuya scolded with a smile. Hearing this, Xiao Chen said helplessly, I just can't bear to leave you, master. That's enough. How can I not know what you're thinking in your heart? Just give up on that thought. If master were to always be by your side, not only would it not be of any benefit to you, it would instead harm you. Your own path, in the end, still needs to be walked by yourself. Hearing that, Jun Wuya smiled. Xiao Chen hoped that Jun Wuya would stay by his side. On one hand, it was for cultivation. On the other hand, it was because he really couldn't bear to part with him. On the other hand, it was for safety. Although he still didn't know what level Jun Wuya's cultivation had reached, Xiao Chen's intuition told him that he had underestimated Jun Wuya all this time. However, if Xiao Chen knew that his master, Jun Wuya, was the most powerful man in the Great Thousand World, and that he alone was almost equivalent to a powerful sect, how would Xiao Chen feel? Of course, even if Xiao Chen knew, it wouldn't be a problem because Jun Wuya wouldn't help Xiao Chen casually. After all, even though Jun Wuya liked Xiao Chen from the bottom of his heart, if he had to rely on Jun Wuya for everything and needed Jun Wuya's protection, then Xiao Chen probably wouldn't have any great achievements in the future. If one didn't experience wind and rain, he would always be a flower in a greenhouse. Although Xiao Chen had experienced a lot of hardships along the way, it was still not enough. If he wanted to become a real powerful man, Xiao Chen had to experience more wind and rain. He had to be down to earth and use his own feet to walk a path that belonged to him. He had to use the sword in his hand to create his own era and not rely on Jun Wuya. The little secret in his heart was directly exposed by Jun Wuya. In response, Xiao Chen smiled embarrassedly. Seeing this, Jun Wuya also scolded him with a smile. All right, you little brat, don't pretend to be innocent. Although I'm leaving, I still have to say that you can't slack off in your cultivation. If I find out that you're slacking off, you should know what I'll do. Humph. Jun Wuya wanted to continue his journey. At the same time, he also reminded Xiao Chen not to slack off in his cultivation. If Xiao Chen's senior brothers and sisters in name in the Great Thousand World knew about this, they would probably be envious. When they followed Jun Wuya had never said something like this. It was simply as if they didn't want to learn. Sometimes, even if they wanted to learn, Jun Wuya was too lazy to teach them. However, when it came to Xiao Chen, Jun Wuya forced Xiao Chen to learn. If Xiao Chen didn't learn, he would punish him. This was the difference between an in-name disciple and a real disciple. Hearing Jun Wuya's words, Xiao Chen respectfully cupped his hands and bowed. Yes, master. Xiao Chen naturally wouldn't refute Jun Wuya's words. Seeing this, Jun Wuya nodded slightly. Then, he looked at the others present. After bidding farewell to them one by one, Jun Wuya stood up and said to Xiao Chen, Kid, come with me. Master has something to say to you alone. After bidding farewell to everyone, Jun Wuya had something to say to Xiao Chen in private. Hearing this, Xiao Chen followed Jun Wuya out of the main hall. Seeing this, Xian Yuanling, Long Qing, and the others tactfully didn't follow. Xiao Chen and Jun Wuya walked out of the courtyard. The two of them, one in front and one behind, leisurely arrived at the peak of a mountain. With his hands behind his back, Jun Wuya calmly looked at the storm before him. With his back facing Xiao Chen, Jun Wuya said slowly. His expression and tone were very serious. Chen I accepted you as my disciple because Patian begged me before he died. However, as we got along, I gradually changed my mind and truly treated you as my disciple, my only disciple. However, there's one thing you can't forget. You owe the heaven-breaking sword sovereign a great deal. No matter what you think, you can't forget this kindness. He didn't hide his thoughts at all. Hearing Jun Wuya's words, Xiao Chen nodded seriously and replied, Don't worry, master. I will never forget Senior Potion's kindness. If I have the chance in the future, I will do my best to repay him. He had never seen the heaven-breaking sword sovereign before, but his bloodline power came from the heaven-breaking sword sovereign. Even if Jun Wuya didn't say anything, Xiao Qin wouldn't forget this kindness. Jun Wuya had never told Xiao Qin about the heaven-breaking sword sovereign in detail. He only told Xiao Qin not to forget the fortune and kindness the heaven-breaking sword sovereign had given him. As such, Xiao Qin decided that if he could find out about the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's descendant in the future, he would definitely do his best to help. Unfortunately, Xiao Qin's wish was destined to fail. After hearing Xiao Qin's words, Jun Wuya slowly turned around and looked at Xiao Qin with a smile. Haha, that's impossible. Patian had no children and never had a disciple, let alone a family. His only friend was me, so there's probably no chance for you to repay him. In fact, not only does Patian not need you to repay him, he has even left you with a second great fortune, or perhaps a heaven-defying benefit. Go, this is what Patian left you before he died. There was no chance for Xiao Qin to repay the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's kindness. Not only was there no chance, but the heaven-breaking sword sovereign had left Xiao Qin with a second treasure. After saying that, Jun Wuya pulled out a small, black sword from his spatial ring. The sword was only the size of a palm, but its shape was extremely beautiful. It was cold to the touch, and one could tell with a single glance that it was no ordinary item. Xiao Qin didn't know what the small sword was. After looking it up and down, he couldn't see anything special about it. The small, black sword seemed to be just an ordinary small sword that didn't have any use at all. He didn't know what the small sword meant at all. However, if someone from the Great Thousand Worlds saw the small, black sword, they would probably be stunned. The small, black sword was called the Heaven-Breaking Sword Token, and it was the symbol of the sword sect's master. It was also the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign's identity token. Within the sword sect, the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had a clear rule that anyone who held the Heaven-Breaking Sword token, no matter who it was, had to be unconditionally acknowledged by everyone in the sword sect as the new master of the sword sect. The Heaven-Breaking Sword token was the symbol of the sword sect's master. In other words, with the Heaven-Breaking Sword token, Xiao Qin could command the sword sect. Wasn't this a huge opportunity for Xiao Qin? The Heaven-Breaking Sword token was the last thing that the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had left for Xiao Qin. It was also the last opportunity that the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign could give to Xiao Qin. Jun Wuya smiled when he saw the curious look on Xiao Qin's face. Boy, you really don't know what's good for you. If this thing was placed in the Great Thousand World, do you know how many people would fight over it? Jun Wuya scolded with a smile. Hearing this, Xiao Qin said helplessly, I just can't bear to leave you, master. That's enough. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? Give up on that thought. If master were to always be by your side, not only would it not be of any benefit to you, it would instead harm you. In the end, you still have to walk your own path, said Jun Wuya with a smile. Xiao Qin hoped that Jun Wuya would stay by his side. On one hand, it was for his cultivation. On the other hand, it was because he really couldn't bear to part with him. On the other hand, it was because it was safe. Although he still didn't know what level Jun Wuya's cultivation had reached, Xiao Qin's intuition told him that he had underestimated Jun Wuya. However, if Xiao Qin knew that his master, Jun Wuya, was the most powerful person in the Great Thousand World, and that he alone was enough to fight against a powerful sect, how would Xiao Qin feel? Of course, even if Xiao Qin knew, it wouldn't be a problem because Jun Wuya wouldn't help Xiao Qin casually. After all, even though Jun Wuya liked Xiao Qin from the bottom of his heart, if he had to rely on Jun Wuya for everything and needed Jun Wuya's protection, then Xiao Qin probably wouldn't have any great achievements in the future. If one didn't experience the wind and rain, he would always be a flower in a greenhouse. Although Xiao Qin had experienced a lot of hardships along the way, it was still not enough. If he wanted to become a real powerful person, Shao Chun had to experience more wind and rain. He had to be down to earth and use his own feet to walk a path that belonged to him. He had to use the sword in his hand to create his own era and not rely on Junwuya. The little secret in his heart was directly exposed by Junwuya. In this regard, Shao Chun smiled embarrassedly. Seeing this, Junwuya also scolded snappily. "All right, you little brat, don't pretend to be innocent. Although I'm leaving, I still have to say that you can't slack off in your cultivation. If I find out that you're slacking off, you should know what I'll do to you." Humph. Junwuya wanted to continue his journey. At the same time, he also reminded Shao Chun not to slack off in his cultivation. If these words were to be heard by Shao Chun's senior brothers and sisters in name in the Great Thousand World, they would probably die of envy. When they followed Junwuya, Junwuya had never said such words. It was simply that they didn't want to learn. Sometimes, even if they wanted to learn, Junwuya was too lazy to teach them. However, when it came to Shao Chun, Junwuya forced Shao Chun to learn. If Shao Chun didn't learn, he would punish him. This was the difference between an in-name disciple and a real disciple. Hearing Junwuya's words, Shao Chun respectfully cupped his hands and bowed. This disciple understands. Shao Chun naturally wouldn't refute Junwuya's words. Seeing this, Junwuya nodded slightly. Then, he looked at the others present. After bidding farewell one by one, Junwuya stood up and said to Shao Chun, "Kid, come with me. Master has some things to say to you alone." After bidding farewell, Junwuya had some things to say to Shao Chun in private. Hearing this, Shao Chun followed Junwuya out of the main hall. Seeing this, Xian Yuanling, Long Qing, and the others tactfully didn't follow. Shao Chun and Junwuya walked out of the courtyard. The two of them, one in front and one behind, leisurely arrived at the peak of a mountain. With his hands behind his back, Junwuya calmly looked at the storm before him. With his back facing Shao Chun, Junwuya said slowly. His expression and tone were very serious. "Chun-er, I took you in as a disciple at the beginning because of Potion's dying wish. However, as we interacted with each other, I gradually changed my mind and truly treated you as my disciple, my only disciple. However, there's one thing you can't forget. You owe the heaven-breaking sword sovereign a great deal. No matter what you think, you can't forget this kindness." He didn't hide his thoughts at all. Hearing Junwuya's words, Shao Chun nodded seriously and replied, "Don't worry, Master, I will never forget Senior Potion's kindness. If I have the chance in the future, I will definitely repay him." Shao Chun had never met the heaven-breaking Sword Lord, but the power of his bloodline came from the heaven-breaking Sword Lord. Even if Junwuya had not mentioned it, Shao Chun would not have forgotten such a great favor. Junwuya had never told Shao Chun about the heaven-breaking sword sovereign in detail. He only told Shao Chun not to forget the fortune and kindness the heaven-breaking sword sovereign had given him. As such, Shao Chun decided that if he could find out about the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's descendant in the future, he would definitely help if he could. Unfortunately, Shao Chun's wish was destined to fall through. After hearing Shao Chun's words, Junwuya slowly turned around and looked at Shao Chun with a smile. "Haha, that's impossible. Patian had no children, and he never had a disciple, let alone a family. His only friend was me, so there's probably no chance for you to repay him. In fact, not only does Patian not need you to repay him, he even left you with a second great fortune, or rather, a heaven-defying benefit. Go, this is what Patian left you before he died." Shao Chun was destined to have no chance of repaying the favor of the heaven-breaking Sword Lord. Not only was there no chance, but the heaven-breaking Sword Lord had also left Shao Chun with something else. With that, Junwuya pulled out a small, black sword from his spatial ring. The sword was only the size of a palm, but its shape was extremely beautiful. It was cold to the touch, and one could tell with a single glance that it was no ordinary item. Xiao Chen didn't know what the small sword was, and after looking it up and down, he couldn't see anything special about it. The small, black sword seemed like an ordinary sword that didn't have any use at all. He didn't know what the small sword meant at all, but if someone from the Great Thousand Worlds saw the small, black sword, they would probably be stunned. The small, black sword was called the Heaven-Breaking Sword Token, and it was the symbol of the sword sect's master. It was also the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign's identity token. The Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had a clear rule in the sword sect, and that was that the person who held the Heaven-Breaking Sword Token, no matter who it was, had to be unconditionally acknowledged by everyone in the sword sect as the new master of the sword sect. The Heaven-Breaking Sword Token was the symbol of the sword sect's master, which meant that Xiao Chen could command the sword sect as long as he held the Heaven-Breaking Sword Token. Wasn't this a huge opportunity for Xiao Chen? The Heaven-Breaking Sword Token was the last thing that the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign had left for Xiao Chen, and it was also the last opportunity that the Heaven-Breaking Sword Sovereign could give to Xiao Chen. Jun Huiya smiled when he saw the curious look on Xiao Chen's face. "Kid, you really don't know what's good for you. If this thing was placed in the Great Thousand World, do you know how many people would fight over it? Please add it to your collection, vote, recommend it." Chapter 1882. Xiao Chen indeed did not know how precious the Heaven-Sundering Sword Token was. After hearing Jun Huiya's words, Xiao Chen was still puzzled. Jun Huiya helplessly explained to Xiao Chen, "Boy, do you know what the words sword sect mean in the Great Thousand World?" Hearing this, Xiao Chen shook his head. Upon seeing this, Jun Huiya explained, "The sword sect was founded by the Heaven-Sundering Sword Supreme. In the Great Thousand World, there were 10 great Lingtian sects. Lingtian sects were sects that even the will of the heavenly way did not dare to offend. They were the true overlords of the Great Thousand World. One should know that the will of the heavenly way in the Great Thousand World was definitely not comparable to the will of the heavenly way in the Eight Desolates world. The difference between the two was like the difference between a grandfather and a grandson. Even the will of the heavenly way in the Great Thousand World did not dare to offend them. Therefore, they were called Lingtian sects, which meant that they were above the heavens and earth. Naturally, there were differences in strength between the 10 great Lingtian sects. When the Heaven-Sundering Sword Supreme was still around, the Sword Sect was at its peak. The Sword Sect was ranked second among the 10 great Lingtian sects. One could imagine how powerful the Sword Sect was. Although there were some changes in the Sword Sect due to the disappearance of the Heaven-Sundering Sword Supreme, in addition to other external factors, the Sword Sect fell, and even fell out of the ranks of the 10 great Lingtian sects. Not many people dared to underestimate the strength of the Sword Sect. Although the current Sword Sect was no longer the same as when it was at its peak, and had even fallen out of the ranks of the 10 great Lingtian sects, the Sword Sect was still one of the few powerful sects in the Great Thousand World. Now that the Heaven-Sundering Sword Supreme had passed the Heaven-Sundering Sword Token to Xiao Chen, it was equivalent to handing the entire Sword Sect to Xiao Chen. Putting aside the future, the Sword Sect was of great help to Xiao Chen now. More importantly, there was a mysterious formation in the Heaven-Sundering Sword Token. The effect of this formation was similar to a voice transmission talisman. With the Heaven-Sundering Sword Token, no matter where one was, even if he was across countless worlds, he could contact the sword. Not only could he speak, but even his image could be projected directly into the main hall of the Sword Sect, so that both sides could converse face to face. With the Heaven-Sundering Sword Token, Xiao Chen could contact the Sword Sect at any time. After hearing Jun Huiya's introduction, Xiao Chen naturally did not have a direct understanding of the strength of the Sword Sect because he had never been to the Great Thousand World. He asked doubtfully, "Master, how does the Sword Sect compare to the Hachibra Senkai?" Hachibra Senkai was currently the most powerful sect that Xiao Chen had ever come into contact with. By comparing the sword sect to the Hachibra Senkai, Xiao Chen could directly understand the strength of the sword sect. However, after hearing Xiao Chen's words, Jun Wuya did not bother to hide his disdain for Xiao Chen at all, and then said in an annoyed tone, "How petty. What is the Hachibra Senkai in front of the sword sect? It's like a baby. If the sword sect wants to destroy the Hachibra Senkai, it'll be a piece of cake." Jun Wuya was speechless when Xiao Chen compared the Hachibra Senkai to the sword sect. However, Xiao Chen would slowly find out about these things in the future. After talking about the sword sect, Jun Wuya took out another token. It was very ordinary, but this token represented Jun Wuya. With this token, Xiao Chen could prove that he was Jun Wuya's disciple. In this way, it should be of help to Xiao Chen in the great wide world. After all, Xiao Chen still had a few senior brothers and sisters in name. Although Jun Wuya had never admitted that they were his disciples, these people had always called themselves Jun Wuya's disciples in name. Moreover, these people were doing well in the great wide world. If necessary, they might be able to help Xiao Chen. Jun Wuya was very considerate of Xiao Chen. Not only did he give Xiao Chen 2 tokens, but he also gave Xiao Chen a lot of healing pills and magic treasures. After all, this was his only disciple. Jun Wuya had to continue his travels and did not know when he would return to the great wide world. Only then would they be able to meet again. Jun Wuya did not want Xiao Chen, whom he had put in a lot of effort and liked, to die when he was not around. Therefore, Jun Wuya placed great importance on Xiao Chen's safety. Although he did not say it, Xiao Chen could feel Jun Wuya's concern for him and felt warm in his heart. Jun Wuya patted Xiao Chen on the shoulder and said, "Well, take care of yourself. Don't miss me. When the time comes, we will meet again." Hearing Jun Wuya's words, Xiao Chen did not say much. He bowed respectfully and said, "Disciple will see you off, master." Hearing this, Jun Wuya laughed heartily. Then, he took a step forward and disappeared in an instant. Only Xiao Chen's voice was still echoing between heaven and earth. "Haha, Chun take care of yourself and cultivate well. Don't miss me. One day we will meet again in the great wide world." Jun Wuya left in the end. Xiao Chen saw Jun Wuya off and returned to the courtyard. At the same time, outside the first wilderness, the Hachibra Senkai's army was already at the city's gates. With the permission of the 2 elders, the 8 Desolates, under the leadership of the Will of the Heavenly Way, launched an all-out attack on the Hachibra Senkai. After months of fighting, the Hachibra Senkai had completely retreated to the first wilderness. The experts from the 8 Desolates had also completely surrounded the first wilderness, waiting for the final blow to the Hachibra Senkai. Seeing that the army was already at the city's gates, the Hachibra Senkai had no way to deal with the 8 Desolates, who had the help of the mysterious experts. Hong Lian's injuries were still not healed. On the contrary, they were getting more and more serious. It had been a long time, but no matter what they did, Hong Lian's injuries showed no signs of improvement. If Hong Lian was not an immortal emperor and had the cultivation of an immortal emperor, she would have died a long time ago. After being injured by the mysterious experts, there was a cold, spiritual energy in Hong Lian's body that could not be dispelled. There was no way to dispel this cold, spiritual energy. If this went on for a long time, Hong Lian would not be able to escape this calamity. Hong Lian's injuries were uncontrollable, Mu Tai was killed, and the 8 Desolates were at the city's gates. The Hachibra Senkai was indeed in a precarious situation. The remaining 6 world overlords gathered together today, discussing how to deal with the situation. However, one could tell that all of their expressions were extremely heavy. There was no solution to this. Given the current situation, there was basically no way to resolve it. The strength of those mysterious experts was simply too strong. In front of absolute strength, what could the world overlords do? Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1883. Towards those mysterious experts, Luo Li and the other sector lords knew nothing. Their identities, where they came from, the sector lords had no clue at all. The only thing they knew was that these mysterious experts were few in number. There were only about 10 of them, but each of them was exceptionally powerful. They were at least existences that had surpassed the immortal Emperor realm. Hachibara Senkai was naturally powerless against the sudden appearance of so many experts. At this moment, all the world lords gathered together, each of them looking worried. During this period of time, because of the help of these mysterious experts, the 8 Desolation Immortal World had been pressuring them step by step. Now, it could be said that the 8 Desolation Immortal World had no way out. They had holed up in the first wilderness, but this was not the solution. It was not an exaggeration to say that if they still could not think of a solution, Hachibara Senkai would be destroyed. They were already on the verge of destruction. After a moment of silence, the 5th Realm Lord, Yu Aochuan, finally spoke. Is there still no news from Yishao? They were powerless against these mysterious experts. In their despair, the sector lords thought of Jun Wuya, Shao Chen's master. After all, Jun Wuya was an expert that had surpassed the immortal Emperor realm. Although the sector lords did not know what realm Jun Wuya had reached, they knew that he was at least much stronger than the immortal Emperor realm. If there was a way to resolve Hachibara Senkai's crisis, it was probably only Jun Wuya. Moreover, Jun Wuya was Shao Chen's master. As such, if the Hachibara Senkai asked Shao Chen for help, Shao Chen would not sit idly by. Therefore, when Hachibara Senkai started attacking, the sector lords had already sent Yi Shao to search for Shao Chen. They did not know Shao Chen's exact location, but the sector lords guessed that Shao Chen should be in the second wilderness. Therefore, they sent Yi Shao to search for him there. Unfortunately, several months had passed and there was still no news from Yi Shao. This made the sector lords somewhat anxious. After hearing Yu Aochuan's words, the rest of the people's gazes landed on Luo Li. Faced with the crowd's gazes, Luo Li helplessly smiled bitterly and said, "Not yet." There was still no news from Yi Shao. Luo Li did not know what was going on. When he had asked Yi Shao previously, Yi Shao told Luo Li that there was still no trace of Shao Chen. Shao Chen could not have gone to the other wilderness. He could only have appeared in the second wilderness. However, Yi Shao had been searching in the second wilderness for several months and still could not find Shao Chen's whereabouts. It was not strange that Yi Shao could not find him. After all, with Jun Wuya's methods, not to mention Yi Shao, even the sector lords would not be able to find the continent Shao Chen and the others were on. Shao Chen was nowhere to be found and the Hachibara Senkai was now forced to the edge of a cliff. If they could not think of a solution soon, once the mysterious experts took action, the only path left for them would be destruction. Silence. Just as the sector lords gathered together and couldn't come up with a solution, on the other side, Yi Shao, who was in the second desolation, was also sitting on a spaceship, searching over and over again. After several months without any results, Yi Shao could be said to have searched every corner of the second wilderness. However, until now, he still could not find Shao Chen. Yi Shao began to suspect that Shao Chen was not in the second wilderness. However, he did not give up because he knew that if he could not find Shao Chen, the fate of the Hachibara Senkai could be imagined. He must find Shao Chen. Therefore, Yi Shao searched back and forth in the second wilderness again and again. Another few days passed. On this day, Yi Shao was still searching for Shao Chen's whereabouts in the second wilderness as usual. He did not have much hope, but suddenly Yi Shao saw a figure in the endless starry sky. Yi Shao recognized this figure. It was Shao Chen's elder brother, Xianyuan Ling. Upon seeing Xianyuan Ling, Yi Shao's eyes flashed with unconcealable ecstasy. Then, without caring about anything else, he stood on the deck of the spaceship and shouted loudly. Brother Xianyuan. Yi Zhao's shout naturally attracted Xianyuan Ling's attention. After realizing that it was Yi Xiao, Xianyuan Ling took the initiative to land on the spaceship and said with a smile, "Why are you in the second wilderness?" He didn't expect to meet Yi Xiao here. As a matter of fact, Xianyuan Ling only came out to take a breather and find out if there were any changes in the 8 wilderness in the past 20 years. But who would have thought that he would meet Yi Xiao as soon as he came out? Compared to Xianyuan Ling's doubts, Yi Xiao couldn't help but feel ecstatic. He ignored Yi Xiao's question and immediately asked, "Brother Xianyuan, where is Xiao Chen? Is Xiao Chen with you?" He immediately asked about Xiao Chen's whereabouts. Upon hearing this, Xianyuan Ling did not hide anything. He nodded and said, "Of course third brother is with me. What's wrong? Quickly bring me to him. Something has happened, something big has happened," Yi Xiao hurriedly said when he heard that. Upon seeing Yi Xiao's anxious expression, even though Xianyuan Ling was full of doubts, he still led Yi Xiao's group into the continent where everyone was. This time, Yi Xiao only brought 5 people to the second wilderness to search for Xiao Chen. One of them was an immortal emperor stage elder from the 7th realm, who was also an acquaintance of Xiao Chen, Li Qiu. The rest were several immortal venerables from the 8th realm. Including Yi Xiao, there were a total of 6 people. With Xianyuan Ling leading the way, Yi Xiao's group naturally entered the continent where Xiao Chen and the others were. They didn't expect that there would be a continent hidden in the void and set up restrictions around it. It was no wonder that Yi Xiao's group couldn't find it after searching for several months. They had searched this area many times, but they still couldn't find the existence of this continent. At the same time that they were secretly surprised, they also felt fortunate that they had met Xianyuan Ling today. If they did not have Xianyuan Ling leading the way, they would probably not be able to find this continent even if they searched for another 10 years. The spaceship slowly descended. Then, Xianyuan Ling led Yi Xiao's group all the way to their residence. In the front yard, Hong Xiu was already waiting there. Apparently, she had already known about the arrival of Yi Xiao's group. In fact, this wasn't strange. The restrictions around this continent were set up by Jun Wuya. Therefore, no matter who entered, Xiao Chen would know immediately. Seeing Yi Xiao's group striding into the courtyard, Hong Xiu smiled and said, "Senior brother, why are you here?" "Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1884. It had been 20 years since she last saw Yi Xiao. She was naturally happy to see him again. After all, they had grown up together. In her heart, Yi Xiao was no different from her brother. Yi Xiao was naturally happy to see Hongxiu again. However, now was clearly not the time to reminisce. She could only suppress the longing in her heart. Yi Xiao looked at Hongxiu and said anxiously, "There's no time to say more. Junior sister, where's Xiao Chen?" She immediately asked about Xiao Chen. Hearing this, Gu Lingyao, who was standing beside Hongxiu, replied, "My husband is cultivating in the backyard. Why are you looking for him?" Xiao Chen was indeed cultivating. That was why he didn't come out to welcome Yi Xiao. It wasn't that Xiao Chen was putting on airs or anything. Yi Xiao only noticed Gu Lingyao after hearing her word. He had never seen Gu Lingyao before. Yi Xiao asked curiously, "You are?" "Senior brother, this is Sister Lingyao," Hongxiu said before Gu Lingyao could reply to Yi Xiao's question. Yi Xiao instantly understood Gu Lingyao's identity after hearing Hongxiu call Gu Lingyao sister. She was probably one of Xiao Chen's wives. Yi Xiao knew that Xiao Chen wanted to revive Xiao Chen's family after they were killed. However, when he saw Gu Lingyao, Yi Xiao was shocked. Could it be that Xiao Chen had succeeded? Hongxiu and Yi Xiao had asked Honglian about Xiao Chen's matter. She asked if there was a way to revive Xiao Chen's family. However, the answer they received was that it was impossible. At least, Honglian and the other sector lords couldn't do it. Even the sector lords couldn't do it. However, it seemed that Xiao Chen had succeeded. However, when they thought about it, Xiao Chen had a master like Junwia. It wasn't surprising that he could do it. Yi Xiao was stunned for a moment. Soon, he cupped his hands and bowed to Gu Lingyao. Then, he turned to Hongxiu and said, Junior sister, Hachibra Sinkai is in big trouble. Can you let me see Xiao Chen? Yi Xiao didn't have the time nor the mood to explain too much to Hongxiu. He only had one thought, and that was to see Xiao Chen as soon as possible. That was the most important. When Hongxiu heard Yi Xiao's request and saw that he was indeed in a desperate situation, she nodded and said, Follow me. Xiao Chen was cultivating, but Yi Xiao had an urgent matter to attend to. Moreover, it was related to Hachibra Sunkai. Therefore, Hongxiu led Yi Xiao to the backyard where Xiao Chen was. Gu Lingyao didn't object to this. After all, although this little girl liked to cause trouble, Gu Lingyao was still able to distinguish the severity of the situation. Yi Xiao followed Hongxiu all the way to the backyard. The moment Yi Xiao entered the backyard, he saw Qin Shuru, Baihua Fairy, Tian Yu, and Luan Luan. The three girls were sitting in a pavilion in the middle of the yard and chatting. As for Luan Luan, she was playing in the yard. When he passed by the three girls, Hongxiu introduced, Elder sister, this is my senior brother. He is here to look for our husband. Hearing Hongxiu's words, Qin Shuero and Tian Yu only nodded faintly without saying anything. Only 100 Flower Fairy smiled and said, My husband is in the training room. Sister, go ahead. Looking at the three beautiful girls in front of him and Gu Lingyao, Yi Xiao couldn't help but feel envious. He thought to himself, Xiao Chen's luck is too good. The girls around him are all peerless beauties. Although he was envious, Yi Xiao shook his head and forcefully discarded these thoughts. He followed Hongxiu and the two of them arrived at the training room where Xiao Chen was. He gently knocked on the door. Hongxiu was the first to push the door open and enter. As for Yi Xiao, he waited outside. Fortunately, they didn't have to wait for too long. After Hongxiu entered, Xiao Chen strode out of the room. Seeing Yi Xiao's anxious face, Xiao Chen asked, What's wrong? Yi Xiao, why are you in such a hurry? Xiao Chen, I've been looking for you for a long time. Something big has happened. Hachibra Senkai is about to be finished, Yi Xiao immediately said when he finally saw Xiao Chen. Seeing how anxious Yi Xiao was, Xiao Chen was taken aback. However, he maintained a calm expression and said, Don't worry. Come in and talk. Since the matter was urgent, Xiao Chen didn't care about etiquette. He immediately invited Yi Xiao into his training room. Then, the two of them sat opposite each other. Yi Xiao briefly explained the situation to Xiao Chen. Not only did he tell Xiao Chen that the 8 Desolates had launched a large-scale attack on Hachibra Senkai, and that the Hachibra Senkai had retreated to the first desolation, Yi Xiao also told Xiao Chen about the mysterious experts who had suddenly appeared. In the end, Yi Xiao purposely asked, Xiao Chen, where is your master? I'm afraid that your master is the only one who can save Hachibra Senkai. Those mysterious experts are definitely stronger than the Celestial Emperor realm. Even Realm Lord Mu Tai was killed by them. Mu Tai had been blasted to death. Xiao Chen did not feel the slightest bit of joy when he heard the news. Although Mu Tai and Mu Fan were father and son, Xiao Chen did not have much of a grudge against Mu Tai. Compared to Mu Tai's death, Xiao Chen was more concerned about the mysterious experts. According to Yi Xiao, there weren't many of them, but each of them was extremely powerful. It was obvious that they were stronger than the Celestial Emperor realm. Xiao Chen's first reaction to the sudden appearance of so many powerful beings was that these mysterious people were from the Great Thousand World. After all, only the Great Thousand World had so many powerful beings. After living with Junwei for 20 years, Xiao Chen naturally had some understanding of the Great Thousand World. At the same time, Junwei had also told him how to go to the Great Thousand World. He didn't expect the experts from the Great Thousand World to come to the 8 Desolates world. Seeing that Xiao Chen was silent, Yi Xiao couldn't help but ask, Xiao Chen, where is your master? Only Xiao Chen's master could save Hachibra Senkai. However, after hearing Yi Zhao's question, Xiao Chen's reply made Yi Zhao's heart sink to the bottom. Master has already left. I guess he has already left the 8 Desolates world. Jun Wuya had left. Yi Zhao was stunned when he heard this. He immediately sat down on the ground weakly. What should he do now that Jun Wuya wasn't around? Was the Hachibra Senkai really going to be destroyed like this? Yi Zhao's heart was filled with despair. However, at this moment, Xiao Qin calmly said, I'll go with you to the first Desolates. No, you're no match for them. You'll only be courting death if you go. Xiao Qin had no intention of standing by and doing nothing. However, Yi Zhao rejected his suggestion. In Yi Zhao's opinion, even if Xiao Qin rushed back to the first Desolates, he wouldn't be able to do anything. He would only be like a lamb in a tiger's den. He was no match for those mysterious experts. In that case, it would be better for Xiao Qin and the others to stay here. At least this place was hidden and it would be difficult for the 8 Desolates to find them. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1885. Although Yi Zhao couldn't sense Xiao Chen's current cultivation realm, even a god wouldn't be able to surpass the immortal Emperor realm in just 20 years. Let alone surpassing the immortal Emperor realm, it would be impossible for him to even reach the immortal Emperor realm. If that was the case, what could Xiao Chen do even if he went to the first wilderness? Was he going to die with the Hachibra Senkai? Since Jun Wuya wasn't around, Yi Zhao had completely given up hope. As for Xiao Chen's suggestion of returning to the first wilderness, Yi Zhao didn't even consider it. In Yi Zhao's opinion, it was equivalent to sending them to their death. Since the Hachibra Senkai was doomed, Yi Zhao didn't want Xiao Chen and the others to sacrifice themselves in vain. Moreover, Hong Xiu was obviously one of Xiao Chen's people now. Whether it was for public or private reasons, Yi Zhao didn't want anything to happen to Xiao Chen. However, after hearing Yi Zhao's words, Xiao Chen smiled and said, Don't worry, I have a way to deal with this. Yi Zhao felt that Xiao Chen would be sending himself to his death if he went back. However, Xiao Chen didn't think so. After all, Xiao Chen wasn't stupid enough to do something that would lead to his death. Seeing Xiao Chen's confident expression, Yi Zhao was puzzled. He had already explained the situation to Xiao Chen clearly. Those mysterious people were so powerful that even the realm lords couldn't deal with them. Could Xiao Chen have a way to deal with them? But that was impossible. Faced with Yi Zhao's puzzled face, Xiao Chen took the lead and stood up. He did not intend to explain. He smiled and said, Well, do you think I'm the kind of person who would seek death? If I say there's a way, then there's definitely a way. You should think about how to safely bring me back to the first wilderness. Now, the first wilderness is probably surrounded by experts from all over the 8 wilderness. Xiao Chen's only request to Yi Zhao was to find a way to safely bring them back to the first wilderness. As for everything else, Xiao Chen would take care of it. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Yi Zhao was still in a daze. But by then, Xiao Chen had already walked out of the room. Xiao Chen summoned Xianyuan Ling, Long Qing, the girls, Xiao Qing, and Bai Ruyue to the front hall. Xiao Chen told everyone about the Hachibra Senkai and expressed his attitude. He was going to the first wilderness to save them. Xiao Chen had never forgotten the kindness Luoli had shown him. Now that the Hachibra Senkai was in trouble, Xiao Chen would not stand by and do nothing. According to Xiao Chen, the girls, Xiao Qing, and Bai Ruyue would continue to stay here. After all, there was a restriction set up by Jun Wuya, so there was no need to worry about their safety. Xiao Chen, Long Qing, and Xianyuan Ling would go to the first wilderness. However, just as Xiao Chen expressed his thoughts, Qin Shuru was the first to speak. I don't want to go with you. Qin Shuru did not want to stay here alone. Following his words, Flower Fairy, Gu Lingyao, Tian Yu, Hong Xiu, Shao Qing, Bai Ruyue, Qing Yao, and Qing Luo also expressed their desire to go with Shao Chen. After what happened last time, they did not want to be separated again, even if they had to die together. Shao Chen could not do anything about this. Seeing that everyone was determined, Shao Chen could only nod helplessly and agree. Everyone headed to the first wilderness. In less than an hour, Shao Chen and the others boarded Yi Zhao's spaceship. At the same time, Shao Chen put away the wooden houses that they had been living in. Before Jun Weia left, he specifically told Shao Chen that these wooden houses were treasures and should not be abandoned. Shao Chen believed him without a doubt and kept the wooden houses in his storage ring. There was nothing much to prepare, so the group left shortly after. After Shao Chen and the others left and the wooden houses were taken away, the continent that was full of vitality quickly turned into a land of death. It was as though the previous scene was just an illusion. The group boarded the spaceship and rushed to the first wilderness. Along the way, Yi Xiao was really perturbed. After all, Jun Weia was not around. Would Shao Chen be able to deal with those mysterious powerhouses? She tried to persuade Shao Chen several times not to go, but Shao Chen did not listen to her at all. On this day, Yi Xiao and Shao Chen stood side by side on the deck and gazed at the endless starry sky. Yi Xiao spoke again. "Brother Shao Chen, I really think that..." Before Yi Xiao finished his sentence, Shao Chen already knew what he wanted to say because Yi Xiao had said the same thing many times over the past few days. Before Yi Xiao finished his sentence, Shao Chen interrupted. "All right, I'm confident. You, on the other hand, do you have a way for us to enter the first wilderness safely? If we can't even enter the first wilderness, then everything we say will be in vain." Entering the first wilderness safely was the prerequisite. Upon hearing Shao Chen's words, Yi Xiao let out a helpless sigh and said, "That's not a problem. When the time comes, I will send a message to the Realm Lords and they will come to our rescue. If they only wanted to enter the first wilderness safely, then there wouldn't be a problem. But what about after that? How was Shao Chen going to defend against the attacks of the mysterious powerhouses?" The doubts in his mind were still unanswered. But in this regard, Shao Chen had no intention of explaining further. He smiled and said, "That will be enough." After saying that, without giving Yi Xiao a chance to reply, Shao Chen turned around and entered the starship. Upon entering the starship, Shao Chen saw Wine Daoist and Li Qiu. Upon seeing Shao Chen, Li Qiu hesitated to speak. It was apparent that she had the same thoughts as Yi Xiao. Shao Chen nodded to the two of them and returned to his room. In the room, Qin Shuru and the other women were cultivating. When they saw Shao Chen enter, the five of them opened their eyes. Seeing this, Shao Chen smiled and said, "Go to Mother's place first. Also, don't let anyone disturb me." Upon hearing Shao Chen's words, Qin Shuru and the other women did not ask any further. They immediately got up and left the room. At the same time, they asked Fei Mei and Enlan to guard the door of Shao Chen's room and prevent anyone from entering. They did not ask Shao Chen what he wanted to do. As the five women left, Shao Chen took out the Heaven-Sundering Sword token that the Heaven-Sundering Sword Sovereign had left for him from his storage ring. This was the source of Shao Chen's confidence. The Heaven-Sundering Sword Sovereign was the sect leader's token of the Sword Sect. With the Heaven-Sundering Sword token, one could command the entire Sword Sect. Since those mysterious powerhouses were most likely from the Great Thousand World, the powerhouses of the Sword Sect could naturally descend to the Eight Desolates world as well. Because of this, Shao Chen was not afraid of those mysterious powerhouses at all. "Let me see if I, the sect leader of the Sword Sect, can use the power of the Sword Sect. Can this Heaven-Sundering Sword token make the powerhouses of the Sword Sect obey my orders?" Looking at the Heaven-Sundering Sword token in his hand, Shao Chen murmured softly. Then, he injected spiritual energy into it and activated the symbol array within the Heaven-Sundering Sword token. begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1886. With the infusion of spirit force, the glyph array within the heaven-sundering sword token was activated. Then, a silver light shot out from the heaven-sundering sword token and quickly formed a 1 square meter square screen of light in front of Xiao Chen. This wasn't the first time Xiao Chen had contacted the sword sect. The day after Jun Wuya gave him the heaven-sundering sword token, Xiao Chen had used the heaven-sundering sword token to contact the sword sect. He had also told the experts in the sword sect that he was the successor of the heaven-sundering sword sovereign. It was also because of the previous contact that Xiao Chen was so confident this time. After all, if he hadn't contacted the sword sect, Xiao Chen wouldn't have been so confident. After all, how could he be sure that the experts in the sword sect would listen to his orders if he didn't know anything about them? The heaven-sundering sword sovereign had given strict orders that he could command the entire sword sect with the heaven-sundering sword token. Moreover, Xiao Chen was the successor of the heaven-sundering sword sovereign. However, Xiao Chen wasn't a member of the sword sect. Moreover, he was just a brat. It wouldn't be easy for him to get the big shots in the sword sect to listen to his orders. Fortunately, when he contacted the sword sect last time, most of the big shots in the sword sect still respected him. Or rather, they respected the heaven-sundering sword sovereign. This made Xiao Chen feel a little more at ease. He also felt that the heaven-sundering sword token was indeed useful. Otherwise, if the people in the sword sect didn't listen to him or the heaven-sundering sword sovereign's orders, Xiao Chen wouldn't have any use for the heaven-sundering sword sovereign. They couldn't just let Xiao Chen hold the title of sect master of the sword sect without being able to use the power of the sword sect, could they? If that was the case, what was the point? Looking at the light screen in front of him, an image gradually emerged on the light screen. At a glance, he knew that the other side of the light screen should be inside a large hall. At the same time that Xiao Chen activated the formation of the heaven-sundering sword token, at the peak of a mountain surrounded by clouds in the vast thousand realms. From afar, this mountain peak looked like a giant sword that was plunged straight down. This was where the sword sect was located. On top of the mountain, there were many beautiful buildings. There were even many buildings that stood on top of the white clouds around the mountain. At a glance, it gave people a feeling of uncanny craftsmanship. In the center of all these buildings, which was also the center of the mountain peak, there was an ancient hall in the shape of a sword. At this moment, one figure after another appeared in the hall. In the center of the hall, there was a giant black sword that looked exactly the same as the heaven-sundering sword token. It was about 4 meters long. At this moment, the giant black sword also emitted a white light that formed a light screen in the hall. On the other side of the light screen was Xiao Chen. The two black swords, one large and one small, were connected to each other. Whether it was Xiao Chen activating the heaven-sundering sword token or someone from the sword sect activating the giant black sword, they were immediately connected to each other. Sensing that Xiao Chen had activated the heaven-sundering sword token, the sword sect's 2 deputy sect masters and the 5 sword sovereigns immediately rushed to the hall. In fact, the hierarchy of the sword sect was not complicated. Under the sect master were the 2 deputy sect masters, and below them were the 5 sword sovereigns. As for the elders, deacons, and disciples below them, there was no need to bother about them. To put it simply, all these years, due to the disappearance of the heaven-sundering sword sovereign, the entire sword sect's affairs were handled by the 2 deputy sect masters and the 5 sword sovereigns. It was also because of their existence that the sword sect was able to stand tall and hold a place in the great thousand world. However, due to Xiao Chen's anxiousness, only 5 of the 2 deputy sect masters and the 5 sword sovereigns came. One of the deputy sect masters and one of the sword sovereigns were absent. The 5 of them appeared in front of the light screen and looked at Xiao Chen. They all cupped their hands and bowed. Greetings, Sect Master. These 5 people were considered to be on Xiao Chen's side when he contacted the Sword Sect previously. As for the Deputy Sect Master and the Sword Sovereign who were absent, they were very against him. Seeing that the 2 of them were absent, Xiao Chen did not mind. It was fine if they did not come. After all, it was useless even if they came. Based on their attitude towards him, they probably would not be willing to help him. He looked at the Deputy Sect Master who was leading the group. He was middle-aged and thin. As for his appearance, there was nothing outstanding about him. He was the kind of person that no one would take a second look at if he was thrown into a crowd. However, one should not underestimate this seemingly ordinary middle-aged man. To be able to become one of the 2 Deputy Sect Masters of the Sword Sect, this person's strength was definitely not low. Although Xiao Chen did not know what his current cultivation level was, it was definitely not weak. Xiao Chen smiled and looked at the Deputy Sect Master. Senior Cangxing, I have encountered some trouble here and I need the Sword Sect's help. Although Xiao Chen was the Sect Master, his attitude was very kind and he even referred to himself as a junior. In fact, this was very normal. After all, Xiao Chen had not even been to the Sword Sect yet. If he acted like he was the most important person, who would feel comfortable? His name was Cangxing. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Cangxing respectfully replied, Sect Master, please do not be like this. Just call Cangxing by his name. As for the Sword Sect's strength, as long as Sect Master says a word, no one in the Sword Sect will dare to disobey. Cangxing was indeed very respectful to Xiao Chen. Although a large part of the reason for this was because of Sword Sovereign Heaven breaking, this still made Xiao Chen feel slightly more at ease. However, Xiao Chen did not know that Cangxing was actually Sword Sovereign Heaven breaking's sword slave. He had been saved by Sword Sovereign Heaven breaking when he was young and had followed Sword Sovereign Heaven breaking ever since. At the same time, Sword Sovereign Heaven breaking also taught Cangxing cultivation. Later on, when Sword Sovereign Heaven breaking founded the Sword Sect, Cangxing was made one of the 2 Deputy Sect Masters of the Sword Sect. It could be said that Cangxing was Sword Sovereign Heaven breaking's trusted aide. Therefore, after Xiao Chen revealed that he was Sword Sovereign Heaven breaking's successor, Cangxing became Xiao Chen's loyal supporter without hesitation. In Cangxing's opinion, no matter what Xiao Chen was like, since Xiao Chen was chosen by Sword Sovereign Heaven breaking, Cangxing would support Sword Sovereign Heaven breaking's choice 100%. Upon hearing Cangxing's words, Xiao Chen replied with a smile. Thank you, Senior Cangxing. Actually, the situation isn't that complicated. A group of people suddenly appeared here, then. He told Cangxing and the others about the mysterious people in the 8 Desolates world. Cangxing didn't say much, but an elder beside him frowned and said, Sect Master, it's a long journey from the vast 1000 world to the 8 Desolates world. Even if we rush there at full speed, it will take at least a month. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1887. Xiao Chen had truthfully told Cangxing and the others about the 8 Desolates world. At this moment, the elder was worried that they would not make it in time. After all, according to Xiao Chen, with the Hachibra Senkai's current situation, it would be very difficult and almost impossible for them to hold on for at least a month. The elder's name was Yang Song, and he was one of the 5 great sword leaders of the Sword Sect. He was also considered a loyal supporter of Xiao Chen, which was why he spoke up. Upon hearing Yang Song's words, Xiao Chen was not worried at all. He smiled and said, It's all right, I can hold on for at least 2 months. As long as all of you can reach there within 2 months, it will be fine. Xiao Chen was confident that he could hold on for 2 months. Upon hearing this, Yang Song nodded and said, In that case, there won't be any accidents. As long as sect leader can hold on for 2 months, we will definitely be able to reach the 8 Desolates world and wipe out everything for sect leader. Yang Song's words sounded very arrogant, but the Sword Sect did indeed have the ability to do so. Although the Sword Sect was no longer as glorious as it used to be after the disappearance of the heaven-breaking Sword Sect, no matter what, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. In the entire Great Thousand World, only the 10 great Lingtian sects would dare to say that they could firmly suppress the Sword Sect. Other than the 10 great Lingtian sects, the other forces were at most slightly stronger than the Sword Sect. If they really fought, the worst that could happen was that both sides would suffer. Therefore, Yang Song did not care about the identity of the mysterious black-clothed men who suddenly appeared in the 8 Desolates world, nor did he care about which force was behind them. In any case, no matter who it was, the Sword Sect was not afraid of them. As for the 10 great Ling Tian sects, with their strength, they would not even go to a place like the 8 Desolates world. The reason was very simple: they did not think highly of the 8 Desolates world. Song Xing and Yang Song did not object to Xiao Chen's request, but the other 3 sword leaders remained silent. Obviously, they did not care about going to Hachibra Senkai or Xiao Chen's order. Xiao Chen had long noticed the attitude of the 3 of them, but he did not say anything. After all, he was only the clan master now, but in reality, he had almost no control over the sword gate. Hearing Yang Song's words, Xiao Chen nodded with a smile and said, "In that case, Junior will wait for Senior Yang Song's arrival." "Sect Master, you're too kind. I'll definitely rush to Hachibara Senkai's rescue. I won't let you down." Yang Song bowed respectfully. The matter was basically settled. As for the others, such as those in the Sword Sect who did not agree with him or those who were secretly against him, they could only wait for Xiao Chen to go to the Great Thousand World. Xiao Chen closed the light screen, and Song Xing and the others also bowed respectfully to send him off. "Farewell, Sect Master." The light screens on both sides disappeared at the same time, and the huge black sword in the main hall fell silent again. At the same time, Song Xing looked at the other 3 sword leaders, except for Yang Song, and said with a slightly solemn expression, "What do the 3 of you mean? The sect master is in trouble, and the 3 of you are not going to do anything? Or are the 3 of you going to disobey the old sect master like He Ying?" The old sect master that Song Xing was talking about was Sword Sovereign Patian, and He Ying was the other deputy sect master. Hearing Song Xing's reprimand, the 3 sword leaders cupped their hands and said indifferently, "Deputy sect master, you must be joking. It's just a desolate land, and it's enough to have deputy sect master and Yang Song. If we go, it'll be making a mountain out of a molehill." The 3 of them obviously did not take Song Xing's reprimand to heart. Song Xing was furious, but there was nothing he could do. The current situation in the Sword Sect was very delicate, so even though Song Xing was furious at the 3's actions, he obviously could not do anything to them. After all, if he did, the Sword Sect would very likely fall apart, and this was something that Song Xing did not want to see. He glared fiercely at the 3 of them, but the 3 of them acted as if they did not see it and smiled faintly. "Since there's nothing else, we'll take our leave." After speaking, they did not give Song Xing a chance to reply, and did not care whether Song Xing agreed or not. The 3 of them immediately disappeared from where they were, and it was obvious that they had directly left. The 3 of them did not take Song Xing seriously at all. In response, Yang Song sighed helplessly. Currently, the entire upper echelon of the Sword Sect was clearly divided into 3 camps in the face of Xiao Chen's sudden appearance as the new sect master. One was the support faction led by Song Xing and Yang Song. The other faction was the opposition faction led by He Ying and another sword head who was not present today. The last faction was the neutral faction led by the 3 sword heads from before. The support faction firmly supported the heaven-breaking Sword Sovereign's decision, and were willing to support Shao Chen to become the new sect master of the sword sect. As for the opposition faction, needless to say, they were definitely against Shao Chen becoming the new sect master. As for the neutral faction, their attitude was somewhat subtle. They did not support, but they did not oppose either. Both sides had the same origin, and this could be seen from the actions of the three sword heads from before. When Shao Chen activated the heaven-breaking sword token, the three sword heads did indeed come. However, after arriving, they did not make a single move. It was as if this matter had nothing to do with them. Of the three factions, only the matter of Shao Chen becoming the new sect master was fought both openly and secretly. However, up until now, no one had gained any advantage. Or rather, the three factions had not truly begun to fight. After all, Shao Chen had not yet arrived at the sword sect. Now was not the time to truly make a move. Yang Song sighed, then looked at Song Xing and said, "I'll go this time. The vice sect master needs to stay in the sword sect to oversee the situation and wait for the sect master to return." Song Xing definitely could not leave the sword sect right now. After all, He Ying was watching from the side. Hearing Yang Song's words, Song Xing did not refute and helplessly nodded. "If that's the case, then I'll have to trouble you to make this trip." Hearing Song Xing's words, Yang Song nodded and replied, "No problem, I can personally escort the sect master back." Shao Chen had obtained the approval of the heaven-breaking sword sovereign and became the new sect master of the sword sect. As such, Song Xing and Yang Song naturally hoped that Shao Chen could return to the sword sect as soon as possible. This was because only with Shao Chen's return could they find a way to stabilize the situation in the sword sect. Otherwise, if the three factions continued to split, the situation in the sword sect would become even more precarious. Currently, the three factions were only in the upper echelons of the sword sect, as well as the middle echelons of the elders and personal disciples. However, if this dragged on, it was hard to guarantee that it would not spread to the lower echelons. When that time came, even the ordinary disciples at the bottom of the hierarchy would be divided into three factions. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1888. Shao Chen didn't know about the conversation between Song Xing and Yang Song, but he knew that not everyone in the sword sect welcomed him. After turning off the heaven-sundering sword token's glyph array, Shao Chen let out a sigh of relief. It seems that it won't be easy to take control of the sword sect. Shao Chen felt a little helpless, but at least there were still people in the sword sect who supported him. This gave him a chance. Otherwise, Shao Chen probably wouldn't even look at the sword sect. It wasn't his anyway. If he didn't accept it, he wouldn't want to be the sect master. Shao Chen didn't doubt that Yang Song would definitely bring people over. What Shao Chen needed to do next was to find a way to hold on for 2 months. Shao Chen had already thought about this. It was obviously impossible to rely on himself or the Hachibara Senkai. However, don't forget that before Junwei left, he gave Shao Chen a lot of life-saving treasures. With these treasures, Shao Chen naturally felt a lot more confident. Although Shao Chen felt pained at the thought of using these treasures, in order to save the Hachibara Senkai, Shao Chen couldn't care less. He could find more treasures if he lost them, but if he died, it would be completely over. Luoli had saved his life. At this time, Shao Chen naturally wouldn't hide anything. Even if he used up all the treasures he had, Shao Chen had to hold on for 2 months. After contacting the sword sect, Shao Chen pushed open the door and saw Fei Mei and Enlon standing guard outside. When they saw Shao Chen come out, the two girls bowed gracefully and said, "Young master. All right, there's no need to stand guard here. Go and rest." Hearing this, Shao Chen smiled and nodded. Everything was ready. Shao Chen also secretly breathed a sigh of relief. In the next period of time, the starship continued to fly toward the first wilderness. On the way, they also encountered some spies from the 8 wilderness, but their cultivation was not high. They were only in the great sage realm. Before they could discover them, they were directly killed by Li Qiu and others. The appearance of these great sage realm powerhouses, here, was obviously just a peripheral realm. They were insignificant. Therefore, for Shao Chun and the others, it was not a problem at all. As the days passed, Shao Chen's group got closer and closer to the first wilderness. When they were 1 day away from the first wilderness, Yi Shao sent a message back to Hachibra Senkai, asking for Luo Li and the others' help. For Yi Zhao's message, Luo Li and the others naturally did not refuse, and soon there was a reply. They would arrive at the entrance of the first wilderness in 1 day. At this time, it was estimated that it was surrounded by the 8 wilderness. At the last moment, Yi Shao still did not give up persuading Shao Chen. To be honest, Yi Shao really did not want Shao Chen to go to the first wilderness. In Yi Zhao's opinion, Shao Chen absolutely had no way to deal with those mysterious powerhouses. He would only be courting death if he went. Unfortunately, in the face of Yi Zhao's persuasion, Shao Chen did not give him a chance to speak at all. He directly interrupted, "Yi Shao, why are you so wishy-washy? You only have one task now, and that is to bring us safely into the first wilderness. As for the other matters, I will naturally leave them to me. Moreover, I have already told you that I have helpers." Shao Chun did not know how to tell Yi Shao about the sword sect. After all, Shao Chun himself did not know much about the sword sect. He could only say that he had helpers. However, Yi Shao still had a look of disbelief on his face. Shao Chun really had no other way. At this point, he was too lazy to explain. Anyway, the facts would explain everything in the end. Shao Chun did not give Yi Shao a chance to explain at all. A day passed in the blink of an eye. In the morning of the second day, the starship they were on was infinitely close to the entrance of the first wilderness. At the same time, Luo Li and the others led the Hachibra Senkai and many powerhouses in the first wilderness out of the entrance without warning. This time, the battle between the two sides was no longer limited to the warriors above the immortal realm. Saints, quasi-sages, and great sages were also involved. Therefore, the number of people was simply much more than before. Without the slightest warning, Luo Li and the others suddenly launched an attack. In this regard, the will of the heavenly way was caught off guard for a moment and was caught off guard. It was not that the will of the heavenly way did anything wrong, but in the current situation, the Hachibra Senkai had no reason to launch an attack at all. What was the point of their attack? Now, under the leadership of the will of the heavenly way, Ba Huang had directly blocked the entrance of the first wilderness. They were just waiting for the mysterious powerhouses to arrive and destroy the Hachibra Senkai in one fell swoop. At this time, it was absolutely unwise for the Hachibra Senkai to take the initiative to attack at this time. Naturally, the will of the heavenly way did not know that Luo Li and the other sector lords took the initiative to attack not because they wanted to do anything to the Ba Huang, but because they wanted to let Shao Chun and the others safely enter the first wilderness. That was all. At the entrance of the first wilderness, Luo Li and the other sector lords were fighting fiercely with the will of the heavenly way. The will of the heavenly way sneered as he fought fiercely with Luo Li. "Luo Li, are you crazy? You dare to take the initiative to attack when you are about to die, ha?" The will of the heavenly way was not afraid of Luo Li at all. In a few days, when the mysterious powerhouses arrived, they would launch a fatal attack on the Hachibra Senkai. At that time, the Hachibra Senkai would be completely destroyed and become a part of the history of the Ba Huang world. From then on, the Hachibra Senkai would no longer exist in the Ba Huang world. Luo Li ignored the words of the will of the heavenly way. Moreover, from the beginning to the end, Luo Li did not have the slightest intention of fighting with the will of the heavenly way. He was not in a hurry to fight with the seventh wilderness. He rarely fought with the seventh wilderness head-on. Countless people were fighting fiercely. The entrance of the first wilderness was also in complete chaos. At this moment, a small starship came from the distant starry sky. Obviously, it had increased its speed to the maximum. Then, it rushed towards the first wilderness. The wills of the heavenly Tao quickly understood the intentions of Luoli and the other sector lords when they saw the starship that had suddenly appeared. They took the initiative to attack because they wanted to protect the starship as it entered the first wilderness. They were puzzled. Who could make Luoli and the other sector lords protect them at all costs? The two sides were completely engaged in a fierce battle. Even though many experts from the Ba Huang world saw the starship, they could not extricate themselves from it. They could only watch as the starship rushed into the first wilderness and safely entered it. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1889. Things went very smoothly, mainly because many of the cultivators from the 8 barren lands were not prepared at all. Therefore, Xiao Chen and the others entered the first barren lands safely. After Xiao Chen's group safely returned to the first wilderness, Luo Li's group also began to retreat. After all, they had achieved their goal, and there was no need to continue fighting to the death. In the face of the Hachibra Senkai's group's retreat, the will of the Heavenly Way did not give the order to pursue. In their opinion, the Hachibra Senkai was already a pile of bones in the grave. As long as the mysterious experts arrived, they would definitely be able to destroy them in one fell swoop. Therefore, there was no need to fight to the death with them here. After successfully covering Xiao Chen's group's return to the first wilderness, Luo Li's group also retreated to the second wilderness. The Ba Huang's group also did not pursue them. At the entrance of the first wilderness, the Hachibra Senkai's 8 palaces floated in the air, ready to deal with the Ba Huang's group's attack at any time. In the 7th Realm Palace, Xiao Chen saw Luo Li's group returning not long after. Seeing Xiao Chen, Luo Li was very happy, but at the same time, somewhat helpless. From Yi Zhao's message, Luo Li and the other realm lords already knew that Jun Wuya had left. Without Jun Wuya, the realm lords would find it hard to believe that Xiao Chen could stop those mysterious experts. But even so, Luo Li still smiled at Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen, hearing Luo Li's words, Xiao Chen also cupped his hands and bowed. Realm Lord. Although Xiao Chen had already left the Hachibra Senkai, he was still as respectful to Luo Li as usual. After greeting each other, Xiao Chen first settled his parents and Luan Luan, then went to the main hall with Luo Li and the others. After taking a seat, Luo Li looked at Xiao Chen. He did not hide his thoughts and said solemnly, Xiao Chen, you shouldn't have come. Just like Yi Xiao, Luo Li also thought that Xiao Chen should not have come. Since Jun Wuya had left, Xiao Chen should not have appeared in the first wilderness. Because of this, he would be sacrificing himself for nothing. Luo Li was very considerate of Xiao Chen. Hearing this, Xiao Chen smiled and said, Realm Lord, you don't have to worry. I have my own ways. Luo Li and the others had no way to deal with the 8 desolates, or rather, those mysterious experts. However, Xiao Chen was different and did not say anything. Soon, Xiao Chen, accompanied by Luo Li and the other realm lords, arrived at the entrance of the first wilderness. From here, they could vaguely see the 8 desolates' camp. With a calm expression, Xiao Chen took out a black triangular stone-like object from his storage ring. It was densely covered with extremely complicated patterns. Xiao Chen could not understand these patterns, and neither could Luo Li and the other realm lords. Seeing Xiao Chen take out the black stone, Luo Li, Yi Xian, Qin Yun, and the other realm lords were all puzzled. They did not know what Xiao Chen wanted to do. The realm lords naturally had not seen this item before. This item was given to Xiao Chen by Jun Wuya. The Boundary Jade was an extremely powerful defensive treasure in the Great Thousand World. It was somewhat similar to a talisman array, but compared to a talisman array, the Boundary Jade was of a much higher grade. Moreover, its defensive power was more than 1 grade higher. Unfortunately, the spirit formation jade also possessed a limitation. That is, it was only capable of defense, and did not possess any other offensive capabilities. However, to the current Xiao Chen, as long as he had defense, it was enough. After all, Xiao Chen's goal was not to defeat those mysterious experts, but to hold on until the experts of the sword sect arrived. The boundary jade that Jun Weia gave to Xiao Chen could be said to be the highest grade boundary jade in the Great Thousand World. He took out 5 similar boundary jade in a row. These 5 boundary jade were enough to cover the entire first desolation. One must know that Jun Weia only gave Xiao Chen 6 boundary jade, but now, Xiao Chen used 5 of them without even blinking. In fact, Xiao Chen could only protect the Immortal Realm continent. However, if that was the case, then what about the other continents in the first desolation? At that time, they would be attacked by the 8 desolations, and the cultivators of those continents would be killed. Although Xiao Chen was not a good person, in a situation where he had the ability, Xiao Chen still could not bear to see those people being killed. Although treasures were good, they were not as valuable as human lives. If using these 5 boundary jade could save the many living beings in the first desolation, then Xiao Chen felt that it was not a loss at all. In front of Luo Li and the other realm lords, Xiao Chen directly activated the 5 boundary jade. The method of using the boundary jade was not complicated. One only needed to inject spiritual energy, and the boundary jade would automatically activate. Following the activation of the 5 boundary jade, the crowd soon felt an invisible fluctuation rapidly spread out. It went along the periphery of the first desolation, and soon completely enveloped the entire first desolation. Frankly speaking, the reason why the boundary jade had such a strong defensive power was because it was somewhat similar to a spatial imprisonment. Different from ordinary defensive talismans, the boundary jade seemed to be able to imprison the space, and between the spaces, it formed a barrier, which played a defensive role. Its method was much more powerful than talisman arrays. At the same time, the boundary jade could only be refined by a higher-level talisman master. One could clearly feel that the power of the 5 boundary jade had completely enveloped the entire first desolation. Moreover, the space where the first desolation was located could be said to have been directly isolated, as if it had formed a natural world. At this time, if one wanted to enter the first desolation, either they had to have the key to open the boundary jade, or they had to forcibly break the boundary jade. As for the key to open the boundary jade, it was the 5 boundary jade that Xiao Chen used earlier. The 5 boundary jade slowly fell into Xiao Chen's hand. They were the keys to open the boundary jade. After doing everything, Xiao Chen couldn't help but heave an inwardly sigh of relief. With the boundary jade's protection, the safety of the first desolation shouldn't be a problem for the time being. As long as the powerful beings of the sword sect arrived in time, the Hachibara Senkai crisis would be resolved. Luo Li and the others who hadn't come into contact with any boundary jade were slightly taken aback after witnessing Xiao Chen's method. Then, Luo Li couldn't help but ask dubiously, "Xiao Chen, this is a boundary jade. It should be able to stop those mysterious beings for a while," Xiao Chen replied with a smile. The boundary jade should be able to stop those mysterious beings. But after hearing Xiao Chen's words, Zhua Ting chimed in. "But this isn't a long-term solution. Please collect, vote, recommend." Chapter 1890. Even though Xiao Chen had used such a powerful technique, Luo Li and the other sector lords were still uncertain. Just as Zhua Ting had said, the barrier formed by the spirit barrier jade might be able to stop the mysterious experts, but it was only temporary. If the barrier was destroyed, the Hachibara Senkai's fate would still be the same. Zhua Ting's worries weren't unfounded, but Xiao Chen wasn't worried at all. He smiled and said, 2 months is enough. When the time comes, someone will come to rescue us. Xiao Chen naturally knew that the spirit barrier jade couldn't protect the first desolate forever. However, Xiao Chen's goal wasn't to rely on the spirit barrier jade to protect the first desolate forever. He only needed 2 months. As long as the spirit barrier jade could protect the first desolate for 2 months, the people from the sword sect would arrive. Someone would come to rescue them? Hearing this, the sector lords were stunned. They looked at each other. Luoli smiled and said, "I believe in Xiao Chen." Luoli chose to believe in Xiao Chen. Perhaps in Luoli's opinion, it would be Jun Wuya who would come to rescue them. With Luoli's words, the other sector lords nodded. After all, they had no other choice but to believe in Xiao Chen. After successfully using the spirit barrier jade, the first desolate was temporarily safe. Then, Xiao Chen looked at Luoli and said, "Sector Lord, let's go and see Senior Hong Lian." From Yishao, Xiao Chen already knew that Hong Lian was severely injured. Hong Xiu was naturally very worried about this. With the relationship between Hong Xiu and Xiao Chen naturally couldn't just stand by and watch. It just so happened that Jun Wuya had given him some healing pills before he left. He didn't know if they would be effective, but he could only give it a try. Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, Luoli did not refuse. He personally led Xiao Chen and Hong Xiu to the Immortal Realm continent. As for Long Qing, Xian Yuanling, and Qin Shuru, they remained at the entrance of the first wilderness. Although the first desolate was protected by a barrier, they couldn't be completely at ease. Therefore, they had to arrange for people to guard the entrance. Together with Luoli, Xiao Chen and Hong Xiu soon arrived at the Immortal Realm continent and saw the seriously injured Red Lotus. When she saw Red Lotus's pale face and weak aura, Red Beauty immediately burst into tears. She walked up to her mother and called out worriedly, "Mother, little girl." Red Lotus didn't expect Hong Xiu to come. She forced a smile. It was not difficult to tell that Hong Lian was in a very bad situation right now. Fortunately, her cultivation was not low, which was why she was able to hold on. If it were anyone else, they probably would have died long ago. Red Lotus was seriously injured by the mysterious expert. There was nothing she could do. The cold spiritual energy in her body tormented her day and night. Xiao Chen didn't have any way to deal with Red Lotus's injuries. The only thing he could rely on was the healing pills Jun Wuya gave him. He could only hope that these pills would be effective. The mother and daughter exchanged a few words, then Hong Xiu turned to look at Xiao Chen and said with tears on her face, "Husband, please save mother." At this moment, Hong Xiu could only rely on Xiao Chen. Upon hearing Hong Xiu's words, Red Lotus, who was lying on the bed, had a strange look in her eyes. From the way Hong Xiu addressed Xiao Chen, the two should have successfully confirmed their relationship. Red Lotus didn't know what to feel about this. Red Lotus thought highly of Xiao Chen. She didn't have any objections to Hong Xiu following him. However, as a mother, Hong Xiu had been by her side since she was young, so she couldn't help but feel a little reluctant to part with her. Upon hearing Hong Xiu's words, Xiao Chen nodded and said, "Don't worry, I will." He came here to save Red Lotus, so even if Hong Xiu didn't say anything, Xiao Chen wouldn't just stand by and watch. Xiao Chen walked up to Hong Lian and took out a healing pill from his storage ring. This pill was given to him by Jun Wuya. Back then, Jun Wuya said that as long as she was still alive, this pill could save her. He didn't know what kind of pill it was, nor did he know what grade it was. However, from Jun Wuya's description, it should be very precious. After all, Jun Wuya only gave Xiao Chen 3 pills. If this pill couldn't save Hong Lian's life, then Xiao Chen really had no other way. After handing the pill to Hong Xiu, Xiao Chen said softly, "Feed it to Senior." Hong Xiu didn't doubt Xiao Chen's words at all. Hong Lian didn't hesitate either. She immediately swallowed the pill. As soon as the pill entered her stomach, Hong Lian felt an extremely pure medicinal power flowing through her body. Under the influence of this medicinal power, the cold Yin spirit energy in her body was gradually dispelled. The cold Yin spirit energy that had troubled her for so long and she had tried countless methods to deal with it, was now easily dispelled with the help of this pill. Feeling the cold spirit energy in her body disappear, Hong Lian's eyes couldn't help but flash with joy. All this time, Hong Lian's injuries hadn't healed. On the contrary, they were getting more and more serious. In the end, it was all because of the cold spirit energy. Now that the cold spirit energy was gone, Hong Lian was naturally very excited. Seeing her mother's expression, Hong Xiu asked with concern, "Mother, how do you feel?" I'm much better." Hong Lian smiled in response to Hong Xiu's question. As long as the cold spirit energy could be dispelled, Hong Lian would be able to recover. Hearing Hong Lian's words, Hong Xiu was overjoyed. She didn't even care about her mother and Luoli as she hugged Xiao Chen happily. Seeing that the pill was effective, Xiao Chen secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Previously, Xiao Chen was really afraid that the pill wouldn't be effective. If that was the case, then Xiao Chen wouldn't be able to do anything. Fortunately, the pill given by Jun Weao was very effective. It took effect in such a short time. After Hong Lian confirmed that she was fine, Xiao Chen left another pill for her. However, this pill was obviously inferior to the previous one. Nevertheless, it was more than enough to heal Hong Lian's injuries. After chatting with Hong Lian for a while, Xiao Chen and Luoli didn't stay for long. After all, the crisis hadn't been resolved yet. Hong Xiu stayed behind to accompany Hong Lian, while Xiao Chen quickly returned to the entrance of the first wilderness under Luo Li's lead. Now that they didn't know when those mysterious experts would descend, Luo Li didn't dare to relax in the slightest. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1891. Very quickly, they returned to the entrance of the first desolate. Along the way, Luo Li's expression was still very solemn. He had asked Xiao Chen to use the barrier jade to temporarily protect the first desolate. However, this was obviously not a long-term solution. Once the barrier was broken, the first desolate would still suffer the same fate. Luo Li didn't relax much. However, compared to him, Xiao Chen was very calm. Under Luo Li's lead, the two returned to the seventh palace. At this moment, the remaining sector lords were still waiting there. As for what to do next, the sector lords didn't have any ideas. After all, the difference in strength was obvious. What could they do? Could they go out and fight with those mysterious experts? Obviously, it was impossible. For a moment, Xiao Chen had become the backbone of the Hachibara Senkai. After all, they could only rely on Xiao Chen now. Looking at Xiao Chen, Luo Li asked solemnly, "Xiao Chen, what should we do next?" "Nothing. Do what you need to do. Just wait for reinforcements." Facing Luo Li's question, Xiao Chen replied indifferently. Naturally, the people present couldn't do anything. Xiao Chen wouldn't do anything either. They just needed to wait for the experts from the sword sect to arrive. Luo Li and the others obviously didn't agree with Xiao Chen's words. To them, doing nothing was the same as waiting for death. They couldn't accept it, but they didn't say it out loud. After all, the current Xiao Chen wasn't someone they could casually bully. Moreover, the Hachibara Senkai still needed to rely on Xiao Chen. They could guess what the sector lords were thinking. However, they had obviously forgotten one thing. It wasn't that Xiao Chen wanted them to do nothing. It was that they couldn't do anything in the first place. In the face of absolute strength, all schemes and tricks were useless. Xiao Chen and the sector lords knew this very well. Therefore, they couldn't do anything. Xiao Chen didn't explain too much to them. He had already done what he could. Guarding the first desolate and saving Hong Lian. Xiao Chen had already taken care of these matters. Now, they just needed to wait for the experts from the sword sect to arrive. Returning to his residence, it was still Xiao Chen's cave dwelling in the seventh realm. Everything was familiar. However, Xiao Chen's This was because Xiao Chen was accompanied by Qin Shuru Xiao Qin, by Rue and the others. In the next few days, Xiao Chen's life went on as usual. He cultivated and spent time with his family when he was free. Of course, Xiao Chen's current cultivation method was taught to him by Junwei. It was more effective this way. Xiao Chen's life was very comfortable. However, the sector lords were nervous. Half a month passed. On this day, a few black-robed men arrived outside the first desolate. They were the mysterious experts that everyone had been talking about. When these black-clothed experts arrived, the wills of the heavenly Tao respectfully received them. However, the leader of the group said indifferently, "Cut the crap and settle this quickly. We still have matters to attend to." They had waited for so long for these mysterious experts to take action. But now, these mysterious experts had arrived and their attitude was extremely arrogant. However, the sector lords of the Heavenly Way didn't dare to say anything in the face of the arrogance of these mysterious experts. On the contrary, they could only nod and smile in response. Yes, let's begin. Let's begin. We're only responsible for killing the sector lords. As for the other matters, you can settle them yourselves, said the mysterious leader indifferently. He didn't care about the sector lords of the Heavenly Way at all. As soon as he finished speaking, these mysterious experts instantly arrived at the entrance of the first desolate. Looking at the array that was protecting the first desolate, the leader laughed disdainfully. Such a low-level array. It's ridiculous. That person didn't care about the first desolation's defense array at all. He looked down on it. As soon as he finished speaking, he threw a punch. In an instant, a vigorous spiritual force surged out and turned into a huge fist of light. It smashed into the defense array with terrifying power. A defensive array at the level of the first desolate naturally couldn't withstand these mysterious experts. With just one punch, a huge gap appeared in the array, breaking the array with one punch. However, before this person could be happy for too long, Xiao Chen's spirit formation passed through the gap in the array and appeared before them. The first desolate's defensive array was indeed as weak as paper before these mysterious experts. However, no one expected there to be another layer of protection behind the array. It was the spirit formation that Xiao Chen had used. At the beginning, they didn't notice this spirit formation. Or perhaps it should be said that these mysterious experts simply didn't expect a spirit formation to appear in a desolate place like the Hachibara Senkai. Xiao Chen threw another punch, but this time, the barrier conjured by Xiao Chen was able to withstand the man's terrifying attack without any problems. Seeing that his attack couldn't break the spirit formation, a strange glint flashed in the leader's eyes. Then, he threw out 3 more punches in a row in disbelief. However, the result still didn't change. The spirit formation still stood firmly without a single crack. It couldn't be broken. At this moment, another mysterious expert beside him seemed to have discovered something and said in disbelief, "Senior brother, this seems to be a spirit formation." At first, they didn't notice it. However, after the leader's continuous attacks, the other mysterious experts began to carefully observe the spirit formation in front of them. In an instant, they discovered some clues. A spirit formation unique to the Great Thousand World. Hearing this, the leader immediately shook his head and denied it. Impossible. How could there be a spirit formation in such a desolate place? How could there be a spirit formation in the 8 Desolates world? One must know that even in the Great Thousand World, only the major forces would use a spirit formation to defend themselves. Ordinary small forces didn't have one. As such, it was even more impossible for a spirit formation to exist in the 8 Desolates world. However, after hearing this, the mysterious powerhouse who spoke earlier observed carefully and said with great certainty, "Senior brother, there's no mistake. It must be a spirit formation. This space has been completely confined." He was 100% sure that this was a spirit formation. Hearing this, the leader also observed carefully. After a few moments, he confirmed that the spirit formation protecting the first desolate's world was indeed a spirit formation. His expression gradually turned ugly, and he said in an ice-cold tone, "Damn it! How could there be a spirit formation in this desolate place? Please collect, vote, recommend." Chapter 1892. After confirming that it was the defensive boundary, the few mysterious experts became extremely depressed. They thought to themselves, how could there be a defensive boundary in this desolate land? If the defense boundary that protected the first wilderness was like a piece of paper in their eyes, then the defense boundary in front of them was like a steel plate. Meanwhile, the will of the Tao of Heaven, who had led the experts from the 8 wilds to the scene, saw that Yang Qi and Yang Qi were simply standing there, not doing anything. "Exalted One," the 3rd wilds said respectfully. The will of the heavenly way wanted to ask why the mysterious experts were still standing there. He naturally didn't know what a defense boundary was because it was a product of the Great Thousand World. It didn't exist in the 8 desolate. Unfortunately, before the 3rd wasteland's will of the heavens could finish speaking, the leader, who was already angry, slapped the 3rd wasteland's will of the heavens away in an instant. "Get lost! Do I need you to tell me what to do?" the leader shouted angrily. The leader was already in a bad mood when he was stopped by the defense boundary. Now, the will of the heavenly way even dared to ask why the mysterious experts were still standing there. He was clearly asking for a beating. It should be noted that these mysterious experts had never taken the will of the heavenly way seriously, let alone respected them. To put it bluntly, the will of the heavenly way was just a bunch of dogs in their eyes. Seeing that no one dared to speak, the leader looked at the defensive barrier in front of him again. He frowned slightly and the anger in his heart continued to rise. He had thought that dealing with a mere Hachibra Senkai would be a piece of cake. Who would have thought that the Hachibra Senkai would have a defensive enchantment? He was furious in his heart. At the same time, on the other side of the barrier, Luo Li and the other sector lords, as well as Shao Chen, Long Qing, and Xianyuan Ling, slowly appeared. Noticing the actions of the 8 desolates, Luo Li and the others naturally wouldn't sit idly by. They immediately called Shao Chen over. Originally, Shao Chen didn't want to come. With the existence of the defensive barrier, it didn't matter whether he came or not. In any case, those mysterious experts wouldn't be able to break the defensive barrier in a short time. However, unable to resist Luo Li's insistence, Shao Chen came in the end, accompanied by Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling. The mysterious cultivators, as well as the people from the 8 barren lands, naturally saw them when they appeared. The 7th Baron's will of the heavenly path glared at Shao Chen and said coldly, "Don't worry." Shao Chen, the 7th will of the heavenly way, didn't hide his hatred for Shao Chen. However, in response, Shao Chen only glanced at him indifferently. Then, he withdrew his gaze and shifted it to the mysterious expert leading the group. Shao Chen couldn't sense the cultivation of these mysterious experts. It seemed that they were indeed existences beyond the immortal emperor realm. But even so what? They still couldn't break the defensive barrier. Shao Chen didn't avoid the gaze of the leader at all. When the leader met eyes with Shao Chen, he said coldly, "A bunch of ants. Come out on your own and I'll let you die a quick death." Ever since they came to the 8 desolates world, these mysterious experts felt that they were superior. However, Shao Chen smiled disdainfully when he heard this. "Are you out of your mind? What did you say?" Upon hearing Shao Chen's words, the leader flew into a rage. However, Shao Chen wasn't bothered by the leader's rage at all. He spread his hands and said innocently, "Did I say something wrong? Have you ever seen anyone stretch out their neck after being killed? You even came out on your own. I think you're really sick in the head. Was it something a normal person would do to throw his life away? Therefore, Shao Chen absolutely scoffed at the leader's words. Now that the entire First Desolates was protected by the defensive barrier, it was absolutely safe. Only an idiot would go out. Sensing Shao Chen's undisguised disdain, the leader became even angrier. He glared fiercely at Shao Chen and said, "Boy, I'll remember you. You'd better pray that you don't fall into my hands. Otherwise, I'll make it difficult for you to die even if you want to." Meaningless danger. Hearing this, Shao Chen dug his ears and looked at the leader as if he were an idiot. Fine, fine, fine. It'll be difficult for me to die even if I want to. However, come in first. Separated by the defensive barrier, how could Shao Chen be afraid of him? Although the cultivation of these mysterious experts was definitely much higher than Shao Chen's, they couldn't break the defensive barrier. Why should he be afraid of them? Faced with Shao Chen's disdain, the leader was completely furious. He couldn't help but punch the barrier fiercely. Faced with the leader's sudden attack, Luo Li and the others unconsciously broke into a cold sweat. However, Shao Chen didn't change his expression at all from the beginning to the end. He wasn't worried that the defensive barrier given by Jun Wuya wouldn't be able to withstand the attack. Sure enough, when the punch fell, the barrier didn't move at all. It didn't even cause a ripple. Feeling the hardness of the barrier, Shao Chen couldn't help but nod secretly. He felt more confident in his heart. The things that Jun Wuya gave him were indeed good things. It seemed that the hardness of the barrier was above his imagination. That was indeed the case. The 6 boundary jades that Jun Wuya had given to Shao Chen contained the most top-notch boundary jades. Not to mention 2 months, even if the mysterious cultivators were to bombard them for a year, they would not be able to break them. With more confidence, Shao Chen smiled contemptuously when he saw that the leader's punch didn't have any effect. Well, take your time. If you can break in, I'll naturally be at your disposal. After saying that, Shao Chen no longer paid attention to the leader. Instead, he looked at the leaders of the 8 Desolation side with a strange look in his eyes. Long Yang, Tianmushi, the Divine Lord, and Qin Yu. Shao Chen saw the 4 figures. Looking at their appearance, Shao Chen's heart was indeed touched. Especially Qin Yu. After all, Qin Yu had come all the way from the North Star boundary with him. The two of them had a good relationship. It could be said that apart from Long Qing and Xian Yuanling, Qin Yu was Shao Chen's best friend. When they met again, whether it was Shao Chen or Qin Yu, both of them had changed a lot. Sighing inwardly, Shao Chen put away the emotions in his heart, then turned around and left. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1893. Qin Yu seemed to be doing well in the 8 Desolates, but Shao Chen wasn't in the mood to care about that. Like Long Qing and Xian Yuanling, Qin Yu's memory had been tampered with by the will of the Heavenly Way. Shao Chen would definitely find a way to help him in the future, but for now, he had to deal with the crisis before him first. He turned around and was about to leave. Seeing this, the leading mysterious expert gritted his teeth, but he couldn't do anything to Shao Chen. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that if there wasn't the defensive bounded domain, the leading mysterious expert would definitely cut Shao Chen into pieces. Unfortunately, with the defensive bounded domain in the way, he couldn't do anything to Shao Chen. He could only watch Shao Chen leave. The defensive bounded domain was much stronger than he thought. In this way, Shao Chen didn't have to worry at all. Next, he just had to wait patiently for the experts from the Sword Sect to arrive. Seeing that Shao Chen was about to leave, Long Qing, Xian Yuanling, Luo Li, and the others followed closely. Now, everyone was really centered around Shao Chen, including Luo Li and the other realm lords. The sudden appearance of the defensive bounded domain completely blocked the attacks of these mysterious experts. At this time, the will of the Heavenly Way naturally saw that these mysterious experts couldn't do anything to the mysterious defensive power of the First Desolation. They were arrogant, but now they couldn't even break through the first desolation's defense. However, such thoughts were only in the minds of the wills of the heavenly Tao. They naturally didn't dare to reveal it on the surface. After all, these mysterious experts might not be able to break through the defensive bounded domain, but if they wanted to kill them, it would be extremely easy. The 5 of them dared to speak. After several attempts, they still found that it was useless. In the end, the leading mysterious expert took out a sound transmission talisman and contacted 2 elders. "Let the elders deal with it," he said in a deep voice. The 2 elders did not come personally this time. After all, they did not think that it was necessary to deal with a small Hachibara Senkai. Unfortunately, even if they did not want to do it personally, they had no choice, because no one else had the slightest chance of breaking through the defensive charm matrix. The message was sent to the 2 elders in the 7th wilderness. Then, the 8th wilderness had no choice but to retreat and return to their campsite. They had thought that they would be able to destroy the Hachibara Senkai in one fell swoop after the arrival of these mysterious fighters. However, no one had expected that the Hachibara Senkai would retreat with their tails between their legs. Xiao Chun didn't care about Ba Huang's actions at all. As for Luo Li and the others, although they had been paying attention to Ba Huang's actions, they had no choice but to wait for the reinforcements that Xiao Chun had mentioned. It was a fruitless attack. However, just a few days later, the 2 elders on the side of the mysterious experts personally arrived at the first wilderness. Thus, all the mysterious experts who had come to Ba Huang World had gathered outside the first wilderness. When they arrived at the campsite, the 2 elders sat on the main seat. Below them, the 10 mysterious experts and the will of the heavenly way stood respectfully. One of the elders looked at the mysterious expert who had led the group and said indifferently, "Defensive bounded domain? Are you sure it's really a defensive bounded domain?" "Of course, I dare not say anything. It's definitely a defensive bounded domain." Hearing this, the man replied respectfully. Although he was arrogant in front of the will of the heavenly way, he did not dare to show the slightest disrespect in front of the 2 elders. Hearing this, the 2 elders looked at each other. Then, one of them said, "Let's take a look first." It was hard to say anything now. They could only make a judgment after seeing it with their own eyes. Hearing this, the other elder nodded in agreement. Then, the 2 elders and the other 10 mysterious experts went directly to the entrance of the first wilderness. As for the will of the heavenly way, they naturally weren't qualified to follow them. In the blink of an eye, they appeared at the entrance of the first wilderness. Looking at the transparent bounded domain in front of them, the 2 elders frowned slightly and whispered softly. "It's really a defensive bounded domain. But it shouldn't be. How could there be a defensive bounded domain in this wasteland?" A defensive bounded domain was definitely not something that Ba Huang World could create. In the entire Ba Huang World, the strongest expert was only at the Celestial Emperor realm. With the cultivation of the Celestial Emperor realm, it was absolutely impossible to create a defensive bounded domain. Could it be left behind from the Antiquity Age? Another guess was made. Since it was impossible for the Hachibara Senkai to create it, it could only be left behind from the Antiquity Age. This was the most likely possibility. After carefully inspecting the spirit formation, the 2 elders decided to personally attack it. They wanted to see how powerful the defensive spirit formation was. The results surprised the 2 elders. Just like the previous person's attack, the 2 elders' attacks bombarded the defensive bounded domain at the same time, but there was still no effect. Such a defensive ability made the 2 elders' faces turn even uglier. Originally, they thought that even if it was a defensive bounded domain, it was just an ordinary defensive bounded domain. However, it seemed that this was not the case. This defensive bounded domain's level is very high. One of the elders said with a grave expression. Yes, with this defensive bounded domain, it will be difficult for us to break it. Hearing this, the other elder replied. Listening to the conversation between the two elders, the 10 mysterious experts at the side didn't dare to speak. After all, they weren't qualified to interrupt. It would be difficult to break the defensive charm array in a short period of time. However, the two elders were more concerned about where the defensive charm array had come from. In this regard, one of them had a new guess. "Senior, do you think that there are experts from other sects who have come to this barren land?" The sudden appearance of the defensive bounded domain naturally made the elder think that there were other experts from the Great Thousand World who had come to the 8 Wastelands world like them. This guess wasn't impossible. However, after hearing this, the other elder pondered for a moment, then shook his head and said, "Impossible. This world is so remote. Who would come from so far away?" He didn't think that it was an expert from the Great Thousand World who had come. However, if that was the case, where did the defensive bounded domain come from? Unable to figure it out, after a moment of silence, a strange look flashed across the elder's eyes. He then said seriously, "The first wasteland is very strange. This first desolation is very strange. Furthermore, I have a growing feeling that the world spirit is most likely in the first desolation. Therefore, no matter what, we must find a way to break this defensive barrier." Begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. Chapter 1894. The two elders were not very interested in the destruction of the 8th wilderness. However, they had to obtain the world spirit because it was an order from the exalted sect. It could be said that they had searched the entire 8 desolates world, and only the first desolates had not been searched. Now that a defensive barrier had suddenly appeared in the first desolates, the elders suspected that the world spirit was hidden in the first desolates. Therefore, regardless of the reason, they had to break the defensive barrier and enter the first desolation. The other elder nodded in agreement after hearing this elder's words. "Yes, we can't stay in the first desolate land. However, it won't be an easy task to break this defensive boundary. Where there's a will, there's a way. I don't believe there's an unbreakable tortoise shell in this world. Have someone inform them. From today onwards, they will continuously bombard this defensive spirit formation in batches. I want to see exactly how long it can last," said that elder coldly. In the next few days, according to the instructions of the two elders, the experts from the 8 desolates, regardless of their cultivation, had to attack the defensive bounded domain of the first wilderness. Without stopping, the experts from 8 desolates began to attack the defensive boundary. Of course, the mysterious experts were not idle either. They also divided themselves into several groups and took turns to attack the defensive boundary. Luoli and the other sector lords were worried about the mysterious experts and the 8th wilderness. After all, they did not know how long the defense spirit boundary could last. Once the defense spirit boundary was broken, the first wilderness would have no power to resist. Luoli and the other sector lords were worried sick. On the other hand, Xiao Chen's life was very simple. Xiao Chen knew about the 8th wilderness and the mysterious experts' actions, but he did not care about them at all. He continued to live his life as usual. He was not worried that the defense spirit boundary would be broken. In fact, Xiao Chen knew that the defense spirit boundary could not stop them forever. However, it had been almost a month. The experts from the sword sect should be arriving soon. Those from the 8 barren lands and those mysterious cultivators were still bombarding the defensive boundary. As for Xiao Chen, he continued to cultivate every day. Almost a month had passed, and Hong Lian's injuries were more or less healed. As such, Hong Xiu accompanied him to the front lines. Now that her mother had fully recovered, Hong Xiu was naturally in a good mood. She loved Xiao Chen even more. It could be said that although the atmosphere outside was extremely tense, Xiao Chen was not affected in the slightest. Especially with the company of several women, Xiao Chen's days were incomparably comfortable. This time, Shao Qin finished his cultivation and sat in the courtyard with Qin Shuru, Fairy of 100 Flowers, Hong Xiu, and the 5 girls. They talked about the continuous attacks from Ba Huang and Hong Xiu, and Hong Xiu couldn't help but ask, "My husband, I heard from my mother that the mysterious experts from the 8 Desolates are simply crazy. They are attacking non-stop for 24 hours a day. It seems that they are determined to break the spirit array." While speaking, Hong Xiu's face revealed a touch of worry. After all, the actions of the 8 Desolates and the mysterious experts were too crazy. It seemed that they were determined to break the defense spirit boundary. Hearing Hong Xiu's words, Shao Qin was not worried at all. He smiled and said, "Let them be. If they can really break the defense spirit boundary, then it's their ability." Determined to break the defense spirit boundary? It would be strange if they could succeed. Shao Qin thought to himself. Seeing Shao Qin so confident, Hong Xiu smiled sweetly and said, "Yes, I believe in you." Hong Xiu naturally believed in Shao Qin without any doubt. Since Shao Qin said that there was no need to worry, then there was definitely nothing to worry about. Moreover, the 5 girls also knew that the experts from the Sword Sect should be on their way. As for the Sword Sect, Shao Qin did not hold back the 5th girl. After all, there was no need to. Several days passed in a row. The 8 Desolates were still relentlessly attacking the defense spirit boundary. However, after such a long period of bombardment, the experts from the 8 Desolates were indeed exhausted and had consumed a lot of energy. Even though they took turns to rest, the rest time was far from enough for them to recover. Therefore, after so many days, the experts from the 8 Desolates were all dispirited and in a very bad state. However, the mysterious experts had no intention of stopping. They strictly ordered that unless the defense spirit boundary was broken, no one was allowed to rest. In response, the experts from the 8 Desolates cursed in their hearts, but no one dared to openly resist. Nothing had changed. On this day, Shao Qin finally received a message from Yang Song. He told Shao Qin that he had already brought people into the 8 Desolates world. They would arrive at the entrance of the 1st Desolates and meet up with Shao Qin tomorrow at the latest. After receiving Yang Song's message, Shao Qin smiled faintly. "They're finally here. I wonder how strong the experts from the Sword Sect are." This was the first time that Shao Qin had come into contact with the Sword Sect. He was very concerned about the strength of the Sword Sect. After all, Shao Qin was the sect leader of the Sword Sect. He naturally hoped that his sect would become stronger. Yang Song and the others had already entered the Hachibra Senkai, so there was nothing to worry about. On the afternoon of the 2nd day, Shao Qin ordered someone to inform Luo Li and the others. After receiving Shao Qin's invitation, Luo Li and the others quickly arrived at the 7th Realm Hall. When they saw Shao Qin, Luo Li was the first to ask, "What's wrong, Shao Qin?" "Nothing. After playing for so many days, it's time to end it," Shao Qin said with a smile. After hearing Shao Qin's words, the Realm Lords did not know what he meant. Shao Qin did not explain too much and immediately led everyone to the entrance of the 1st Desolation. Through the boundary, everyone could see the experts from the 8 Desolation side attacking wildly. As Shao Qin and the others appeared, the attacks stopped. Then, the 2 elders quickly appeared in front of Shao Qin. This was the first time that he had met the 2 elders. Behind the 2 elders, 10 black-clothed experts looked at each other coldly. These 12 people were the mysterious experts who had descended from the Great Thousand World to the 8 Desolation World. Through the boundary, the 2 elders looked at Shao Qin. One of them said indifferently, "I'm not interested in the internal affairs of the 8 Desolation World. If you open the boundary now, I can guarantee that I won't attack the Hachibra Senkai." The 2 elders' real purpose was to find the world spirit. Therefore, when they saw Shao Qin and the others, they said this. After all, it would be best if Shao Qin and the others could open the boundary. After all, with the toughness of the boundary, It would take a lot of time and effort to forcefully break it open. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1895. The two elders asked Xiao Chen to activate the defensive boundary. Hearing this, Xiao Chen sneered. I was wondering what kind of sect could nurture such an idiot. Now it seems that a crooked stick will have a crooked shadow. As he spoke, Xiao Chen purposely glanced at the mysterious leader. Faced with Xiao Chen's gaze, the man's face instantly darkened, and he glared angrily at Xiao Chen. However, Xiao Chen did not care about the man's glare at all. He paused for a moment, then looked at the two elders who were leading the group and said, Let's go. Do you think I'll believe you? Only a fool would actively activate the defensive boundary. Hearing this, a cold glint flashed in the eyes of the two elders, and one of them said coldly, Kid, although this defensive boundary is strong, it is not invulnerable. If we continue to attack like this, we will break through it one day. If you activate it now, we can let the Hachibra Senkai go. Otherwise, when we break through this boundary in the future, the result will be completely different. Don't regret it. The two elders did not expect that the one in charge of the Hachibra Senkai would be a young kid. However, they were only stunned for a moment, and the two of them quickly spoke. However, Xiao Chen did not care at all when he heard this. It was true that this defensive boundary could not keep them out forever, but it also depended on whether they had the time to do so. Yang Song and the other experts from the Sword Sect had already entered the Hachibra Senkai yesterday, and should be arriving soon. Therefore, the threat of the two elders was not worth mentioning to Xiao Chen, because they did not have the chance to do so. Without the slightest trace of fear in his eyes, Xiao Chen looked indifferently at the two elders, and then said indifferently, Let's talk after you break in. Kid, you're courting death. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, one of the elders shouted coldly. Both of their eyes flashed with a strong murderous intent, but then, without any warning, a silver-white starship cut through the starry sky and stopped at the entrance of the first wilderness. Everyone couldn't help but turn their heads to look at the starship that appeared out of nowhere. There was a black longsword emblazoned on the starship's blade. Sword Sect? Seeing the starship appear, the expressions of the two elders in the lead and the 10 mysterious experts changed slightly, especially the two elders, as they muttered softly. They came from the Great Thousand Domains and naturally knew about the alliance. However, the surrounding experts from the 8 Desolates were confused, as they did not know what the Sword Sect was. Compared to the crowd's surprise and confusion, Xiao Chen secretly heaved a sigh of relief. With the arrival of the Sword Sect's experts, Xiao Chen was no longer afraid of these mysterious experts. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, over 100 experts from the Sword Sect, led by Yang Song, stepped onto the deck one after another. Each of them wore a green robe, and as one of the 5 great sword leaders of the Sword Sect, Yang Song wore a silver robe. The two elders, who had brought over 100 people to the 8 Desolates world, exchanged glances with each other when Yang Song appeared. They could see a grave expression in each other's eyes as they involuntarily muttered softly, Sword Leader of the Sword Sect. Although the two elders did not know Yang Song, they quickly recognized Yang Song from his robe. Yang Song was one of the 5 great sword leaders of the Sword Sect. Although the Sword Sect had declined in the Great Thousand Domains, it was once glorious. So many factions knew about the Sword Sect. They knew that the Sword Sect was divided into ranks. Those who wore silver robes could only be the 5 great sword leaders of the Sword Sect. Those who wore black robes were elders of the Sword Sect. As for those who wore green robes, they were deacons. The disciples wore gray robes. Yang Song's silver robes indicated that he was one of the 5 great sword leaders of the Sword Sect. They did not expect the Sword Sect to suddenly appear here, and even be led by one of the 5 great sword leaders. After a moment of surprise, the two elders quickly bowed respectfully to Yang Song. The Qi clan pays respect to the sword leader of the Sword Sect. May I know which sword leader has arrived? The two elders introduced themselves. They came from a large family called the Qi clan in the Great Thousand Domains. They were both elders of the Qi clan. However, they naturally could not be compared to Yang Song, the sword leader. Even if the head of the Qi clan came personally, he would be nothing in front of Yang Song. This was because the strength of the Qi clan could not be compared to the sword sect. The two were not on the same level. However, Yang Song ignored their greetings. At the same time, Xiao Chen took the initiative to open the defensive boundary and stepped out. With Yang Song's arrival, Xiao Chen naturally did not need the protection of the defensive boundary. However, Luo Li and the others were sweating profusely when they saw Xiao Chen's actions. On the other hand, although the people of the Qi clan noticed Xiao Chen's actions, they did not dare to make any moves because of Yang Song and the other experts of the sword sect. As Xiao Chen stepped out of the defensive boundary, Yang Song, who was standing on the deck of the starship, had a strange look in his eyes. He immediately took a step forward and appeared in front of Xiao Chen. He bowed respectfully to Xiao Chen. Yang Song is the sect leader. Yang Song bowed respectfully to Xiao Chen. Upon hearing this, the two elders of the Qi family were stunned. Both of them were stunned. Yang Song. The newcomer is actually Yang Song, the sword head of the sword sect, sword of the five mountains. Yang Song. Also, what did Yang Song call that kid? Sect leader? There was only one person who could make Yang Song treat him so respectfully and address him as sect leader. That person must be the sect leader of the sword sect. But how is this possible? How old is this kid? And his cultivation is so low. How can he become the sect leader of the sword sect? Looking at this scene, the two elders of the Qi clan were completely stunned. At the same time, a bad premonition arose in their hearts. However, Xiao Chen ignored their reactions and personally helped Yang Song up. Xiao Chen said with a smile, "Senior, you don't have to be so polite. This junior has to thank you for coming all the way here to save me." Even though Yang Song was already his subordinate and treated him respectfully, Xiao Chen didn't neglect him. After all, the matters of the sword sect were somewhat complicated, and Xiao Chen hadn't completely taken control of the sword sect. To put it bluntly, the title and identity of the sword sect leader didn't mean anything at all. Facing Xiao Chen's politeness, Yang Song said with a serious face, "Sect leader, you're being too serious. I will obey your orders. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me." Chapter 1896. Yang Song was very respectful towards Xiao Chen. Of course, this wasn't because of Xiao Chen himself, but because Yang Song obeyed the heaven-breaking sword sovereign's orders and was willing to serve Xiao Chen as his master. Xiao Chen was naturally aware of this. Therefore, in front of Yang Song, Xiao Chen didn't put on any airs of a sect master. In fact, Yang Song was also very polite. Upon hearing the conversation between the two of them, the expressions of the Qi clan members and the wills of the Great Path changed slightly. Although the will of the Heavenly Way didn't know Yang Song's identity, they knew that Yang Song was someone that the Qi family couldn't afford to offend based on the changes in the expressions of the two Qi family elders. The two Qi family elders didn't expect Xiao Chen to be the sect master of the sword sect. But how was that possible? Why would the sword sect let a brat become the sect master? Could it be that, although they were puzzled, they quickly thought of a possibility? The heaven-breaking sword token. That's right, it was the heaven-breaking sword token. In the Great Thousand Worlds, anyone who could obtain the heaven-breaking sword token would become the sect master of the sword sect. This wasn't a secret. Unfortunately, the heaven-breaking sword token had been with Junwia ever since the heaven-breaking sword sovereign fell. Therefore, no one could obtain it. However, no one knew about this. At this moment, the two Qi family elders only thought that Shao Chen could become the sect master of the sword sect solely because of the heaven-breaking sword token. Otherwise, how could Shao Chen become the sect master of the sword sect? The two Qi family elders obviously didn't know that not only did Shao Chen have the heaven-breaking sword token, but he also had the inheritance of the heaven-breaking sword sovereign. Otherwise, why would Yang Song treat Shao Chen so respectfully? If Shao Chen had obtained the heaven-breaking sword token by accident, perhaps even Yang Song wouldn't acknowledge Shao Chen, let alone travel thousands of miles to rescue him. Unfortunately, the two Qi family elders didn't know about this. Furthermore, they probably wouldn't have guessed that Shao Chen was Jun Wuya's disciple. Their expressions were extremely ugly. At the same time, after Shao Chen and Yang Song ended their conversation, he looked at the two Qi family elders with a cold smile on his face. I don't think it's possible for you to break this defensive barrier. Don't you think so? Hearing Shao Chen's words, everyone from the Qi family, including the two Qi family elders, had strange expressions on their faces. Indeed, there was no chance of them breaking through this boundary. Not only that, but now it was a matter of whether or not Shao Chen was willing to let them go. After all, in front of the sword sect, the Qi family was trash. There was no comparison at all. Of course, in the face of danger from the sword sect, the Qi family had their own backing. At this moment, hearing Shao Chen's words, the two Qi family elders looked at each other. Then, one of them looked at Shao Chen and Yang Song and said, I've truly been mistaken. I didn't think that you would be the new sect master of the sword sect. Since that's the case, the Qi family will admit defeat and leave. How about it? Since Yang Song had already arrived with the people from the Sword Gate, the Qi clan could no longer do anything. However, when Shao Chen heard this, he sneered and said, Don't worry. Leave? I think there's something wrong with the Qi family's brains. Do you think it's possible for you to come and go as you please? As soon as Yang Song and the others arrived, the Qi family members were prepared to leave. Naturally, Shao Chen wouldn't agree to this. What a joke. The Qi family members were extremely arrogant earlier. How could they leave so easily now? Upon hearing Shao Chen's words, the two elders from the Qi clan were taken aback. However, the expression of the person who spoke earlier quickly darkened as he looked at Yang Song and said, Sword leader Yang Song, you should know about the relationship between the Qi family and the Bloodblade Valley. We're here on the orders of the higher sect. Where it's possible to make mistakes, we should be lenient. The higher sect the Qi family was referring to was the Bloodblade Valley. Just like the Sword sect, the Bloodblade Valley was one of the strongest forces below the 10 great Lingtian sects. Their strength should be on par with the current Sword sect. Shao Chen had no intention of letting them go. Therefore, the Qi family could only use the Bloodblade Valley. Otherwise, the Qi family wouldn't be able to contend with the Bloodblade Valley with just their strength. In fact, the Sword sect looked down on the Bloodblade Valley. This was because the Bloodblade Valley wasn't even worthy of carrying the Sword sect's shoes in terms of both their foundations and history. When the Sword Gate was at its peak, it would have been a piece of cake for them to destroy the Bloodblade Valley. Unfortunately, following the decline of the Sword sect, many of the Sword sect's powerhouses chose to leave with the heaven-breaking Sword Sovereign. It made sense. These powerhouses had joined the Sword sect because of the heaven-breaking Sword Sovereign. After the heaven-breaking Sword Sovereign disappeared, at least half of the Sword sect's powerhouses either left or died in battle. It was also because of these powerhouses' departure that the Sword sect's current strength wasn't even half of its peak. However, the Sword sect had once been glorious and had once stood among the 10 great Lingtian sects. On the other hand, the Bloodblade Valley had only developed in the past 100 years. In terms of foundation, it couldn't be compared to the Sword sect at all. Moreover, because the Sword sect and the Bloodblade Valley weren't far from each other, and because of the Bloodblade Valley's problems, The relationship between the two parties wasn't harmonious. They weren't incompatible, but they definitely weren't friendly. Many times, when the disciples of the Sword sect met with the disciples of the Bloodblade Valley, there would be bloodshed. When Yang Song heard that the two elders from the Qi clan had used the Bloodblade Valley's name to threaten him, a cold glint appeared in his eyes. He coldly looked at the two elders from the Qi clan. "Do you think the Bloodblade Valley can protect you?" When they heard Yang Song's words, the expressions of the two elders from the Qi clan changed slightly. The two of them were truly brainless. They actually wanted to use the Bloodblade Valley's name to threaten Yang Song and the Sword sect. After all, the relationship between the Sword sect and the Bloodblade Valley was already very tense. Both parties disliked each other. Therefore, if they wanted to use the Bloodblade Valley to suppress Yang Song, they would be courting death. When he heard about the Bloodblade Valley, a glint of killing intent appeared in Yang Song's eyes. When he finished speaking, Yang Song turned around and bowed to Xiaochen. This subordinate earnestly requests sect master to allow this subordinate to kill the people from the Qi clan. Yang Song didn't give them any face. It should be said that the two elders from the Qi clan were courting death. If they hadn't mentioned the Bloodblade Valley, it would have been better. However, they had actually used the Bloodblade Valley to threaten Yang Song. This was courting death. Yang Song didn't fear the Bloodblade Valley at all. Although the Sword sect had declined, as one of the 5 sword leaders of the Sword sect, Yang Song still maintained the pride of the Sword sect. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1897. Yang Song said as he bowed to Xiaochen. Upon hearing this, the two elders from the Qi clan immediately changed their expressions. They could not control the fear that flashed across their eyes. They did not doubt Yang Song's words at all. Furthermore, Yang Song did indeed have the ability to kill them. In other words, if Yang Song wanted to kill them, it would be a piece of cake. Fear appeared on their faces. At the same time, in response to Yang Song's request, Xiaochen was slightly taken aback. He quickly regained his senses and looked at Yang Song with a smile. "Senior, just do what you want to do." Originally, Xiaochen did not intend to kill these people from the Qi family. After all, Xiaochen knew nothing about the situation in the Great Thousand World. He did not know the strength of the Qi family and the Bloodblade Valley. Originally, Xiaochen was worried that if he rashly killed these people from the Qi family, it would cause trouble for himself or the Sword sect. However, since Yang Song had taken the initiative to ask, Xiaochen did not have to worry about it anymore. Since Yang Song dared to directly say that he wanted to kill the people from the Qi family, it meant that he was not afraid of the Qi family and the Bloodblade Valley behind them. Since this was the case, Xiaochen naturally had no reason to stop him. After all, Xiaochen did not have a good impression of the people from the Qi family. Moreover, the people from the Qi family were so arrogant previously. It was fine to kill them. When he saw Xiaochen nod, Yang Song immediately turned around and looked at the elder from the Qi family. Killing intent flashed in his eyes. In response, the two elders from the Qi family unconsciously stepped back as they spoke in fear. "Sword-head Yang Song, you can't kill us. Our Qi family is a subsidiary family of the Bloodblade Valley. If you kill us, the Bloodblade Valley will not let this matter rest." When he heard the words of the two elders from the Qi family, Xiaochen, who was standing beside Yang Song, laughed inwardly. These two elders from the Qi family were really stupid. Even now, they did not realize that Yang Song was hostile towards the Bloodblade Valley. They actually wanted to use the Bloodblade Valley to suppress Yang Song. They were simply tired of living. Xiaochen laughed inwardly. As expected, when he heard the words of the two elders, the killing intent in Yang Song's eyes intensified. The storage ring in his hand flashed, and a simple and unadorned long sword appeared in his hand. He took a step forward, and his bodies. In the face of Yang Song's explosive aura, Everyone present was stunned, especially the will of the heavenly way. Previously, they had felt the power of the two elders from the Qi family. However, compared to Yang Song, it was clearly nothing. The power was terrifying. Yang Song looked at the two elders from the Qi family. His eyes flashed with killing intent as he coldly shouted, "Today, even if the elders from the Blood Blade Valley were here, I would still dare to kill them, let alone your Qi family." After he finished speaking, Yang Song did not give the two elders any chance to speak. He had already slashed out with his sword. With one slash, the sky changed color. This was the first time that the many experts from the Eight Desolates world had seen such a powerful slash. The edge of the sword easily cut through the starry sky, causing the surrounding space to ripple. In the face of Yang Song's slash, the two elders from the Qi family did not have the slightest ability to resist. They could only watch helplessly as the edge of the sword flew towards them like lightning. It could be said that with one slash, the sky and earth lost their color. Under the witness of countless pairs of eyes, the two elders from the Qi family, who were extremely arrogant in the Eight Desolates world and whom no one dared to provoke, were killed by Yang Song with a single slash. Killing two people with a single slash. As one of the 5 sword heads of the sword sect, Yang Song's strength was naturally not something that the two elders from the Qi family could contend against. It was not an exaggeration to say that even the ancestor of the Qi family was nothing in front of Yang Song. At most, he would be able to contend against him for a while. In Yang Song's eyes, the Qi family was just an ant. Families like the Qi family were not limited to the Bloodblade Valley. There were also many similar families and weak sects under the sword sect. Killing two elders from the Qi family with a single slash was not a big deal to Yang Song. Sheathing his sword, Yang Song looked at the other 10 warriors from the Qi family. Faced with Yang Song's gaze, the 10 people seemed to have been immobilized and could not move at all. As for them, Yang Song didn't have the slightest intention to deal with them personally. He simply said, "Kill them." Immediately, several deacons from the starship of the sword sect attacked and killed the 10 people in an instant. At this point, the 12 people from the Qi family who had come to the Eight Desolates world had all been killed. The faces of the will of the heavenly way turned ugly because they no longer had any confidence. Moreover, given the relationship between the Eight Desolates and Shao Chen, they would not have a good ending. This was especially true for the 7th will of the heavenly way. At this moment, there was a hint of fear in his eyes as he looked at Shao Chen. The 7th will of the heavenly way knew very well that Shao Chen would not let him go even if he wanted to because he had killed Shao Chen's entire family. There was a hint of extreme fear in his eyes. At the same time, after dealing with the Qi family, Yang Song once again came before Shao Chen and bowed to Shao Chen. "Sect Master, what should we do next?" Yang Song naturally listened to everything Shao Chen said. Even if Shao Chen said to destroy the Eight Desolates world, Yang Song would not hesitate as long as it was Shao Chen's order. After hearing Yang Song's words, Shao Chen's gaze turned to the will of the heavenly way from the Eight Desolates world. His eyes flashed coldly as he said, "Senior, if we kill the will of the heavenly way, will it affect the Eight Desolates world?" In the Eight Desolates world, the will of the heavenly way had not been killed. Even the first will of the heavenly way was only sealed by the Hachibra Senkai after he was defeated. He was not killed. This was because no one in the Eight Desolates world had the ability to kill the will of the heavenly way. Therefore, Shao Chen did not know if killing the will of the heavenly way would affect the Eight Desolates world. However, Yang Song did not hesitate at all when he heard Yang Song's words. "Sect Master, if you want to kill the will of the heavenly way without harming the Eight Desolates world, there are ways to do it. It's just that it's a little troublesome. Killing the will of the heavenly way would indeed affect the Eight Desolates world. However, There were other ways to kill the will of the heavenly way without harming the Eight Desolates world. It's just that it's a little troublesome. After hearing Yang Song's words, Xiao Qin nodded slightly. As long as it's possible, Xiao Qin had nothing to worry about. His gaze swept across the will of the heavenly way one by one, and finally stopped on the seventh will of the heavenly way. Feeling Xiao Qin's gaze, the seventh will of the heavenly way felt his heart sink to the bottom. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1898. The seventh will of the heavenly way's feelings could be imagined when Xiao Qin locked his gaze on him. He also knew that Xiao Qin would never let him go. The enmity between the two of them had long been irreconcilable. The only way to resolve it was to fight to the death. The seventh will of the heavenly way was filled with a myriad of emotions. Who would have thought that a junior that he could bully as he pleased would grow to such a level in just a few decades? It was simply amazing. Moreover, where did Yang Song and the other powerhouses from the Sword Sect come from? They addressed Xiao Qin as Sect Master. How did Xiao Qin do it? He did not know the identities of Yang Song and the others, nor had he heard of the Sword Sect. However, the seventh will of the heavenly way knew one thing, and that was that Yang Song and the others were obviously much stronger than the Qi clan. Not only in terms of strength, but even in terms of status, the two of them could not be compared at all. Even when facing the Qi clan, the wills of the heavens had to be careful and respectful, let alone when facing Yang Song and the others. It was even more so. Unfortunately, Yang Song and the others obviously would not stand on the will of the heavenly way's side. From everything that had happened just now, as well as the conversation between Xiao Qin and Yang Song, everyone knew that these people were all following Xiao Qin's lead. Compared to the seventh will of the heavenly way's ugly expression, Xiao Qin's expression was very calm. The feeling of powerlessness that he felt when facing the seventh will of the heavenly way had completely disappeared. Although Xiao Qin's current cultivation and strength were probably still not enough to kill the seventh will of the heavenly way, it did not mean that Yang Song could not do the same. Now, the seventh will of the heavenly way, including the other will of the heavenly way, were all in Xiao Qin's hands. He could determine the life and death of the will of the heavenly way with a single thought. He slowly walked towards the seventh will of the heavenly way, while Yang Song followed closely behind Xiao Qin, carefully protecting Xiao Qin. Xiao Qin said indifferently when he arrived before the seventh will of the heavenly way. Looking at the will of the heavenly way that was no longer as glorious as it used to be. You never thought that you would end up like this, did you? Does it feel terrible to be powerless? I was like this back then. Xiao Qin still remembered how powerless he was when he faced the seventh will of the heavenly way. He could only watch as his family was slaughtered by the will of the heavenly way one by one. The feeling of helplessness was indeed very unbearable. The feeling of helplessness was even more unbearable than death, when one could only watch as one's beloved was killed. However, in just a few decades the tables had turned. The powerlessness, paleness, and despair that Xiao Qin once felt were now experienced by the seventh will of the heavenly way. Back then, when Xiao Qin faced the seventh baron's will of the heavenly path, he did not have the slightest ability to fight back. All he could do was watch, unable to change anything. Now, the seventh will of the heavenly way was the same when facing Yang Song and the others. He could not fight back at all. He could only watch, unable to change anything. Hearing Xiao Qin's words, the seventh will of the heavenly way had a complicated expression and did not reply. Xiao Qin did not care about this. After a pause, he continued. Back then, when I obtained the power of living beings, you couldn't wait to kill me. That night, when you appeared in my cave, I once begged you to let my family go, but you didn't agree. At that time, I swore that as long as I didn't die, there would be a day when I would trample you under my feet. I would rub you hard until you couldn't raise your head again." As Xiao Chun spoke, the hatred in his heart instantly gushed out. After so many years, Xiao Chen's hatred for the seventh will of the heavenly way had never diminished. On the contrary, as time passed, it became even more intense. Even after Jun Wuya successfully resurrected Qin Shuru and the others, Xiao Chen did not let go of the hatred in his heart. This was the first time in his life that Xiao Chen hated someone so much. Hearing Xiao Chen's hateful words and feeling the endless hatred coming from Xiao Chen's body, the seventh wasteland's will of the heavens was a little absent-minded. At this moment, without any warning, Xiao Chen suddenly reached out and grabbed the seventh wasteland's will of the heavens by the hair. Then, with a sudden force, the seventh wasteland's will of the heavens fell to the ground. Violent spiritual energy gushed out of his body. At this moment, the experts from the 8 Desolaces finally felt Xiao Chen's current cultivation base. Immortal, perfect immortal emperor realm. An immortal emperor from the 7th Desolation couldn't help but exclaim, "That's right." In just 20 years, Xiao Chen's cultivation base had already broken through to the perfect immortal emperor realm. Everyone present couldn't believe their eyes. Who would have thought that a young man could reach the perfect immortal emperor realm at such a young age? Everyone was incomparably shocked. But at the same time, Xiao Chen didn't stop his actions. While the seventh will of the heavenly way was still in a daze, Xiao Chen suddenly attacked. Before the seventh will of the heavenly way could react, Xiao Chen had already stomped on his face. Xiao Chen's cultivation base had already reached the perfect immortal emperor realm. Because he was caught off guard, the seventh will of the heavenly way couldn't react at all. When he came back to his senses, the will of the heavenly way realized that he had already been stomped under Xiao Chen's foot. He wanted to struggle, but unfortunately, a terrifying qi had already locked onto the seventh will of the heavenly way. It was as though the owner of this qi would cripple him without hesitation if he dared to move. Needless to say, this qi naturally came from Yang Song. After being locked onto by Yang Song, the will of the heavenly way naturally didn't dare to make the slightest movement because he was sure that Yang Song's speed was definitely faster than his. The dignified will of the heavenly way was now being stomped under Xiao Chen's foot. Facing such a scene, the experts of the seventh will of the heavenly way began to move after a brief moment of shock. They immediately wanted to attack Xiao Chen and save the seventh will of the heavenly way. Unfortunately, how could their action succeed? Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, Luoli, and the experts of the sword sect reacted immediately and blocked the path of these people, not giving them any chance to get close to Xiao Chen. At this moment, Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling also revealed their qi. Like Xiao Chen, both of them had also reached the immortal emperor realm. However, compared to Xiao Chen, their cultivation base was only at the initial immortal emperor realm. There was a huge gap between them and Xiao Chen, but even so, it was enough to shock everyone. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1899. Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling had also reached the immortal emperor realm. Although they weren't as strong as Xiao Chen, it was still enough to shock everyone. Xianyuan Ling stopped the group of experts from the seventh wilderness and said with a faint smile, "You can't disturb third brother now. He has been waiting for this day for a long time." At this moment, Xianyuan Ling naturally wouldn't allow anyone to disturb Xiao Chen. Upon hearing this, the experts from the seventh wilderness were stunned and didn't know what to do. They definitely couldn't defeat him. Not to mention that Luoli and the other sector lords were all in the immortal emperor realm. Any one of the experts from the sword sect was enough to suppress everyone present. Xiao Chen didn't care about the actions of the experts from the seventh wilderness because they couldn't even get close to him. At this moment, Xiao Chen looked down at the will of the heavenly way who was under his feet. The hatred in his eyes didn't diminish at all. Have you ever thought that there would be a day when you would be under my feet? The will of the heavenly way naturally hadn't thought of this when he heard Xiao Chen's words. As the will of the heavenly way, he had always been one of the top existences in the 8 wilderness world. How could he have thought that there would be a day when he would be under the feet of a junior? The will of the heavenly way didn't care about the threat of death and scolded coldly, "I only regret that I didn't kill you at all costs." The will of the heavenly way really regretted it. If he could have killed Xiao Chen at all costs when Luoli tried to save Xiao Chen, today's incident wouldn't have happened. At that time, the will of the heavenly way had too many concerns. Firstly, he was afraid of being discovered by others and causing unnecessary trouble. Secondly, the will of the heavenly way felt that it wasn't worth it to fight Luoli to the death for Xiao Chen. However, if the 7th will of the heavenly way knew that today's incident would happen, he would have killed Xiao Chen at all costs that night. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in this world. Even though the will of the heavenly way regretted it now, time wouldn't flow back to that night. Xiao Chen exerted more force on his foot. The face of the 7th barren will of the heavenly path was now deformed by Xiao Chen's stomp. The 7th barren will of the heavenly path's eyes were filled with hatred. "Unfortunately, you won't have the chance," Xiao Chen said plainly. He only regretted that he didn't kill Xiao Chen earlier. However, the 7th will of the heavenly way couldn't fulfill this regret, because Xiao Chen wouldn't give him the chance. He kept stomping as if he wanted to vent all the hatred he had accumulated over the years. To the 7th desolate's will of the heavenly path, physical pain was nothing. What was truly difficult for him to accept was the psychological humiliation. To the will of the heavenly way, being stomped by Xiao Chen was simply humiliating. It was an extremely shameful thing. The 7th will of the heavenly way wished that Yang Song would kill him instead of being stomped by Xiao Chen. He had wanted to struggle for a long time, but Yang Song had been secretly suppressing the 7th Baron's will of the heavenly path, making it so that he could not even move a finger. He could only be trampled under Xiao Chen's foot. He kept trying to struggle, but with Yang Song's strength, especially the 7th will of the heavenly way, he could break free. Therefore, no matter how hard the 7th will of the heavenly way struggled, he couldn't break free from Yang Song's suppression. Xiao Chen sneered when he sensed the 7th will of the heavenly way's eyes filled with unwillingness and humiliation. "What's wrong? Do you feel humiliated? Do you feel unwilling?" "That's right, because I felt the same way back then. I was even willing to kneel before you, but you didn't let my family go. I'm just returning the favor to you." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the 7th will of the heavenly way simply kept quiet. Because in this situation, anything he said would be meaningless. Winner takes all. Xiao Chen had grown up. Moreover, he had the support of a colossus like the Sword Sect. The 7th will of the heavenly way had nothing to show in front of Xiao Chen. This was the truth. No matter what he said, it wouldn't change. Therefore, the 7th will of the heavenly way chose to keep his mouth shut. Seeing that the 7th will of the heavenly way chose to remain silent, Xiao Chen finally loosened his grip. But even so, the 7th will of the heavenly way still couldn't move because Yang Song didn't loosen his grip at all. He had said what he needed to say. He had said all the humiliation he had suffered all these years. Of course, what happened in the past couldn't be changed. But for Xiao Chen, the result was a happy ending. Although he had been separated from his family once, thanks to Junhua, Qin Shuru, his daughters, and his parents had come back to life. Now that his family was together again, this was enough for Xiao Chen. As for the 7th will of the heavenly way, although Xiao Chen's heart was still filled with hatred, it didn't matter anymore. Kill him and this matter would come to an end. The humiliation, fear, and weakness of the 7th will of the heavenly way would disappear with the death of the 7th will of the heavenly way. Xiao Chen took one last glance at the 7th will of the heavenly way and didn't say anything else. Then, He turned his gaze to the people of the seventh will of the heavenly way and pointed at them one by one. Him, and him. Don't hurt these people. The people Xiao Chen pointed at were people he was familiar with, including Chen Yu, Long Yang, the Divine Lord, Tian Mushi, Yinyangzi, Xiao Xing, and others. Xiao Chen naturally would not harm these people. Hearing this, Yang Song, who was at the side, nodded respectfully and replied, "Yes." Xiao Chen let out a breath of turbid air and said, "All right, let's do it. Kill the will of the heavenly way. As for the others, if they dare to stop us, kill them without mercy." Xiao Chen will of the heavenly way wouldn't let a single one of them go. Since Yang Song had said that he had a way to kill them without affecting the Eight Desolates world, Xiao Chen naturally had nothing to worry about. Moreover, these people would always be a scourge if they were left alive. It was better to kill them and end all troubles. Xiao Chen gave the order. Upon hearing this, Yang Song didn't hesitate and immediately said, "Do it." Along with Yang Song's voice, the powerhouses of the Sword Sect naturally took action immediately and attacked the will of the heavenly way. Facing the attacks of the Sword Sect's powerhouses, the will of the heavenly way naturally wouldn't allow themselves to be captured without putting up a fight. They chose to retaliate immediately. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1900. Although the will of the heavenly way did not resign themselves to death in the face of the Sword Sect's experts, they chose to resist. Unfortunately, their resistance was simply too laughable in the face of the Sword Sect's experts. At the same time, seeing that Xiao Chen had given the order to kill all the members of the will of the heavenly way, some of the experts from Ba Huang could not help but take action. It should be known that there were many people in Ba Huang who were loyal to the will of the heavenly way. For the sake of the will of the heavenly way, they were willing to risk their lives. Therefore, even though they knew that they were no match for the Sword Sect's experts, they still chose to take action without hesitation. Unfortunately, Xiao Chen had already given the order beforehand. Other than Chen Yu, Xiao Xing, and the others whom Xiao Chen had specially instructed, anyone who dared to interfere would be killed without mercy. Therefore, as soon as these people took action, they were mercilessly killed by the Sword Sect's experts. Xiao Chen did not care who these loyal members of the will of the heavenly way were. As the saying goes, those who walk different paths cannot make plans together. Since they were so loyal to the will of the heavenly way, then they should follow the will of the heavenly way. In this way, they could be companions on the road to the underworld, and they would not be lonely. Moreover, for the Hachibra Senkai, it would be safer. The strength of the experts from the Sword Sect was naturally not something that the experts from Ba Huang could contend with. Yang Song had even personally killed the will of the heavenly way. With just one move, the seventh will of the heavenly way was directly killed. Then, from the corpse of the seventh will of the heavenly way, a white ball of light appeared in Yang Song's hand. Yang Song's method of killing the will of the heavenly way without affecting the Hachibra Senkai was actually very simple. It was to only kill the intelligence of the will of the heavenly way, but not harm their origin, which was the white ball of light. The will of the heavenly way was the embodiment of heaven and earth, and it represented heaven and earth. Yang Song's method was to kill the will of the heavenly way, and then return their power to heaven and earth. This way, not only could he destroy the will of the heavenly way, but he would also not harm the Ba Huang world. Of course, although this method would not harm the Ba Huang world, many years later, perhaps a new will of the heavenly way would be born in the Ba Huang world. However, this was not a big deal. After all, the new will of the heavenly way would be completely new, and it would not have any connection to the previous will of the heavenly way. As for the matter of killing the will of the heavenly way, Xiao Chen left it all to Yang Song and the other experts from the Sword Sect. After all, Xiao Chun did not have the ability to do so. He did not pay attention to the situation on the battlefield. The outcome of this battle had been decided from the very beginning. With the death of the seventh will of the heavenly way, Chun Yu, Xiao Xing, Yin Yangzi, Long Yang, and the others' memories that had been tampered with by the seventh will of the heavenly way instantly collapsed. For a moment, everyone's eyes flashed with confusion. Their memories had been tampered with by the seventh will of the heavenly way. Now that the seventh will of the heavenly way had died, their memories had naturally returned to normal. After being stunned for a while, Chen Yu and the others finally came back to their senses. Xiao Chen also came to the front of the crowd and looked at everyone with a smile. The seventh will of the heavenly way was dead, and Xiao Chen did not want to dwell on the past. Facing everyone, Xiao Chen smiled and said, "How is it? Have you all recovered?" Chen Yu asked in confusion when he heard that. "Xiao Chen, what happened?" Xiao Chen did not hide anything from Xiao Chen. He told everyone the truth. After listening to Xiao Chen's explanation, everyone sucked in a deep breath and understood the whole story. As Xiao Chen chatted with everyone, the experts of the sword sect quickly finished their battle as well. The members of the will of the heavenly way had all been killed, as well as the loyal members of the will of the heavenly way. Not a single one was left alive. The battle ended very quickly. It could be said that it was a one-sided massacre. After doing all that, the origin energy of the will of the heavenly way was naturally collected by Yang Song. Afterwards, he instructed an elder to fuse the origin energy into the world force of the Eight Desolates world. There was no need for Xiao Chen to worry about this at all. Yang Song took care of everything in an orderly manner. After everything was over, Xiao Chen led everyone back to the first Desolate's immortal realm. Of course, the people of the Sword Sect were also with them. After settling down the people of the Sword Sect and letting them rest, Xiao Chen also told Yang Song that he would personally come tomorrow to discuss the matters of the Sword Sect with him. With regards to this, Yang Song naturally did not have any objections. He immediately nodded and agreed. The matters of the Eight Desolates world were basically settled. The members of the will of the heavenly way were all dead. As for the matters of the other Desolates, Xiao Chen left them to Luoli and the others to deal with. Xiao Chen no longer had any interest in the Eight Desolates world. Since Luoli had once saved him, Xiao Chen would use the entire Eight Desolates world to repay him. From now on, the Eight Desolates world belonged to the Hachibara Senkai. Everything would be decided by the Hachibara Senkai. To suddenly take over the entire Hachibara Senkai was naturally very stressful for Luoli and the others. However, they did not complain at all. After all, it had always been Luoli and the others wished to unify the Eight Desolates world. Luoli and the others, or rather, the entire Hachibara Senkai, were very busy. On the other hand, Xiao Chen was happy to be idle. In his own cave in the seventh realm, Xiao Chen, Chen Yu, Long Yang, the Divine Lord, Tianmushi, Xiao Xing, the Dragon Emperor, and Yin Yangzi were sitting together and chatting casually. The Dragon Emperor and Long Qing had not seen each other for a long time. Facing his daughter, the Dragon Emperor was filled with emotions. On the other hand, Xianyuan Wudi kept pestering Xianyuan Ling, leaving Xianyuan Ling speechless. As for Xiao Chen, he chatted with Chen Yu, Xiao Chen, and the others. They already knew that from now on, the Eight Desolates world would completely change. The Hachibara Senkai would become the only master of the entire Eight Desolates world. Looking at Xiao Chen, Chen Yu asked while drinking, "Xiao Chen, what do you plan to do in the future? Do you want to go to the Great Thousand World?" Xiao Chen briefly explained the origins of Yang Song and the others. Therefore, Chen Yu and the others also knew that outside of the Eight Desolates world, there were many other worlds. The center of these worlds, or rather, the intersection of these worlds, was the Great Thousand World. When they first heard this news, everyone was very surprised. However, they gradually recovered from their shock. Therefore, Chun Yu was also very curious about Xiao Chen's plans. However, based on Chun Yu's understanding of Xiao Chen, this guy was definitely going to the Great Thousand World. This was because he was a person who could not stop moving. In the face of Chun Yu's inquiry, Xiao Chun did not hide anything. He smiled and said, "I should go, but there's no rush. The Hachibara Senkai still has things to deal with. What do you guys plan to do? If you want to stay in the Eight Desolates world, I can let you join the Hachibara Senkai. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me." Chapter 1901. Now that the will of the Heavenly Way had fallen, the entire Eight Desolates world had fallen into the hands of the Hachibara Senkai. With Luoli and the others around, there was naturally no one in the Eight Desolates world who had the qualifications to compete with the Hachibara Senkai. Everyone present was his good friends. If he could help, Xiao Chen would naturally not decline. If they did not wish to leave the Eight Desolates world, Xiao Chen could easily introduce them to the Hachibara Senkai. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Chen Yu smiled and said, "There's no need for that. I still plan to go to the Great Thousand World to take a look." Chen Yu also did not wish to stay in the Eight Desolates world. Hearing this, Long Yang, Xin Jun, Tianmushi, and the others also felt the same. On the other hand, Xiao Xing, Dragon Emperor Yinyangzi, and the other experts of the older generation, perhaps because of their age, were no longer as adventurous as Xiao Chen and the others. Therefore, they were willing to stay in the Eight Desolates world. After all, the Eight Desolation immortal realm would be peaceful for a long time after this battle. Moreover, given Xiao Chen's relationship with the sector lords of the Eight Desolation immortal realm, it would be very comfortable for them to stay in the Eight Desolation immortal realm. Xiao Chen did not have any objections to Xiao Xing and the others' decision. After all, everyone had their own ambitions. Since Xiao Xing and the others wanted to stay, Xiao Chen would naturally make arrangements for them. Furthermore, this was a small matter for Xiao Chen. Everyone chatted casually. At night, under the leadership of the two crazy girls, Hongxiu and Gu Lingyao, a large-scale banquet was held in Xiao Chen's cave residence. Not only did Qin Yu, Long Yang, Xiao Xing, and the others who were familiar with Xiao Chen participate, Luoli, Yi Xian, Yi Xiao, Guan Hong, and the other experts from Hachibara Senkai had also personally come. All the experts in Eight Desolaces gathered in Xiao Chen's cave. Xiao Chen wanted to invite Yang Song and the others from the Sword sect, but Yang Song politely declined. Thinking about it, although Yang Song respected Xiao Chen and Xiao Chen, he didn't want to sit down and drink with people from the Eight Desolates world. Therefore, he wasn't interested in such a banquet. Xiao Chen didn't say anything about Yang Song's refusal. Since Yang Song wasn't willing, then so be it. Everyone gathered together. Because of the destruction of the will of the Heavenly Way, everyone was in a good mood, especially Luoli and the other sector lords. After all, they had been fighting with the will of the Heavenly Way for so many years. Now there was finally a satisfactory result. How could Luoli and the others not be happy? Of course, the main character of tonight was naturally Xiao Chen. He was a perfect immortal emperor and the sect master of the Sword sect in the Great Thousand World. Although they didn't know what had happened to Xiao Chen, it was undeniable that no one in Eight Desolates world would dare to offend Xiao Chen. Even Luoli and the other sector lords were incomparably respectful to Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen could be said to be the top existence in Eight Desolates world, but everyone knew that Xiao Chen's ambition wasn't in Eight Desolates world. Sooner or later, Xiao Chen would have to leave. After completely relaxing, everyone gathered together, drinking and chatting. Tonight's banquet was organized by the two crazy girls, Hong Xiu and Gu Lingyao. Therefore, there weren't any rules. Moreover, everyone knew each other, so they didn't feel restrained. Sitting together with Luoli and the other sector lords, Xiao Chen was now able to face the various sector lords calmly. He wasn't nervous at all because of their cultivation base and status. While chatting with the other sector lords, Luoli suddenly asked, Shao Chen, are you really not going to stay in 8 Desolates World? No, it shouldn't be too long before I go to the Great Thousand World, Shao Chen said with a faint smile. Hearing Shao Chen's words, other than Luoli and Hong Lian, the other sector lords had a strange look in their eyes. Shao Chen also smiled. Shao Chen could naturally guess what the other sector lords were thinking. It seemed like they were afraid of him, or rather, they didn't want him to stay in 8 Desolates World. Thinking about it, the current 8 Desolates World was dominated by the Hachibra Senkai. It was only a matter of time before they completely controlled the entire 8 Desolates World, and it wouldn't be too long. Under such circumstances, if Shao Chen stayed, with Shao Chen's current cultivation base and the sword sect behind him, who would 8 Desolates World listen to? Would they listen to the Hachibra Senkai sector lords or Shao Chen? Therefore, the sector lords were wary of Shao Chen. However, now that Shao Chen had personally said that he would not stay in the 8 Desolation World, the sector lords naturally heaved a sigh of relief when they heard this personally. Shao Chen only felt a little uncomfortable with the thoughts of the sector lords. After all, it was all because of Shao Chen that the Hachibra Senkai was able to survive. But now, everything had just ended, and the sector lords were beginning to think that he was a hindrance. It was as if they wanted to get rid of him after he had outlived his usefulness. However, Shao Chen didn't intend to stay in 8 Desolates World anyway, so he didn't argue with the sector lords. The banquet lasted until late at night and slowly everyone left. After drinking with Luoli and the others for a while, Shao Chen felt a little bored. Especially when the sector lords were on guard against him, Shao Chen didn't like it too much. Therefore, he found an excuse and left Shao Chen. He went to the backyard alone. Compared to the liveliness in the main courtyard, the backyard was much quieter. Shao Chen sat alone in the pavilion in the courtyard and drank. To be honest, he preferred this kind of feeling. But just as Shao Chen was drinking alone, 100 Flower Fairy walked in gracefully. She smiled at Shao Chen and said, "What's wrong? Did you have a bad time chatting with them?" As she spoke, 100 Flower Fairy naturally sat beside Shao Chen. Then, she took the initiative to pour Shao Chen a cup of wine. Her actions were very gentle and made people feel comfortable. 100 Flower Fairy was like this. She always gave people the feeling of a spring breeze. Therefore, Shao Chen liked and enjoyed being together with 100 Flower Fairy. The two quietly snuggled together. Shao Chen revealed a faint smile and said, "There's nothing to be unhappy about. It's just that when they see me, they will be very nervous. So there's no need to say anything." The they that Shao Chen was referring to were the sector lords. As for why they were nervous, Shao Chen didn't say it, but 100 Flower Fairy naturally understood. Shao Chen took a sip of the wine in his cup. 100 Flower Fairy snuggled in Shao Chen's arms and laughed softly. How can a sparrow or a swallow know the ambition of a swan? Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.